a wonderful Valentine's Day yesterday?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we're going to get started here, but first we have a few announcements like we normally do. So as a reminder, please turn off your cell phones so they don't interfere with the video equipment. In the back, we do have coffee and stuff for tea and cider, so please help yourselves to that. And then we also have our island right over here where we have our raffle tickets, and everyone go ahead and put their name in already? Okay? Now remember, you have to be present to win too, so no leaving early. We do have 4 gift cards we're giving away to the 7 Glaciers restaurant today. And let's see here. And we have a few other things. We have our nice little newspaper ad going on right now. One of the things that we want to let everyone know is that if you buy some appliances from us, we are offering Alaska Airline miles that you can add to your account. So if you want to, please ask us about these or pick up a flyer. Also, we're having our yearly customer appreciation sale, also what we call the bag sale. We do have some bags. Miss Alicia has them. Please feel free to grab one if you want to. And basically, you fill up the bag with stuff from across the street, and it's discounted 25% off. So if you're interested in that, please let Alicia know and she'll get you a bag. And then I am now going to go ahead and let Erin take it away. Hello.
So, what's that?
I see. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you. It's better than being at work. Even though I'm working. I'm going to try and squeeze my hand in this small glove because I have cut myself already.
Oh, dear.
My mother would be so pleased. So my name's Aaron Gilman. I'm the executive chef at 7 Glaciers at Alyeska Resort. Anybody been there before?
Yes.
Restaurant chefs can do the same amount of business on Valentine's Day, and it's twice as hard because everybody's in tables of 2. So it seems like twice as much business, and it's not. I'm going to be preparing for you today something that is actually on our menu. It's birch syrup glazed duck breast. We get our birch syrup from Gilman, Talkeetna, so it is an Alaskan product. With a sweet potato puree. I call it a puree. It's actually just baked sweet potatoes. And broccolini. And a little duck, a cinnamon duck jus that we make from the bones of the duck. We don't always butcher our duck, but we do order a case of whole duck just so we have the bones to make the sauce to impart that kind of duck flavor and carry it through the whole dish. It's a great seasonal dish, a winter, fall, you know, sweet potatoes, cinnamon, warm baking spices. So before we get started, is there any questions? I know this young lady back here asked me to relate it to wild duck if I can. Does anybody else have anything they'd like me to touch on? All right. So I'm going to go over a few things that some of you may know. How many of you cook at home regularly? Okay, good. I figured. So something that occurs to me, especially when, say, I cook with my mother. I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And it's interesting. I always used to ask my mother questions about cooking until I got out of culinary school, and then all of a sudden, my mother started asking me questions. My mom asked me questions on how to make dishes that she's made for 20 years. As soon as I graduated, I'm like, it usually turns out fine, Mom. Make the pot roast however you used to make the pot roast. I'm sure it'll be delicious. A couple things I want to point out that I know a lot of home cooks seem to have trouble with. I used to have trouble with before I started cooking in restaurants is take the time to get everything ready beforehand. So you probably won't see me cook here for a little bit, but what I am going to do is, this is a shallot. Everybody see? It's like a little tiny red onion, but it's not quite as strong. That's one of the main differences between restaurant food and probably your food at home is pretty much any vegetable I pick up, any starch I pick up. When I say pick up, I mean finish cooking and put on a plate. That's another restaurant slang term. If I use slang terms that you don't understand, please feel free to ask questions because I'm probably going to do it a lot. Almost everything in the restaurant I pick up gets 3 or 4 things that you may or may not be using at home. I get shallots in the pan. I sweat them. Does everybody know what sweat means? Okay. I sweat shallots, then I'll add just about whatever it is, vegetables or starches. That could be potatoes, it could be rice, it could be risotto, it could be spätzle. Shallots first. Sweat the shallots. Usually no color on the shallots. I'm nervous. Can you tell I'm shaking? It's a big crowd.
Don't be.
You guys weren't kidding. You say don't be. I've cut myself already. How professional does that look? So I'll usually start with some sweated shallots. Then I'll add whatever else is going to go in the pan. Toss it till it's hot all the way through, but not necessarily any color. And then another thing I do is deglaze with chicken stock. Does everybody know what that means? Okay, so when you're cooking in a pan and you get, when you're cooking meat, you get that brown stuff, like when you're making a really nice stew, get that brown stuff on the bottom of the pan. That's called the fond. And what happens is there's sugars in that meat that caramelize. And I say to my cooks quite often, I'm like, you guys, color equals flavor. Now, too much color is a bad flavor. But you want that nice color to get the flavor because it caramelizes the sugars in the protein, and the only way to get that off is to add a liquid. So when you see a recipe that says something like sear your meat and then add the wine, a couple things that a lot of people miss. Pan needs to be really hot if you want a nice sear. Not so hot that it's going to catch on fire as soon as you put something in it, but hot enough that you can put raw meat and it's not going to stick. If you put raw meat in it and it sticks, your pan wasn't hot enough. A little bit of oil as well, not a lot of oil. Another problem my mother and I have is I'm like, Mom, get the pan hot. She's like, okay. Then she gets it hot and it blows up. I'm like, too hot. Like, you said to get it hot, and then you go into that back and forth thing. Little bit of oil when you're searing stuff. And that's just to lubricate the pan. But that fond, that color that sticks to the bottom of the pan is what gives everything its flavor. So if you want that flavor to carry over into your dish, you need to get it off of there somehow. So I'll sweat the shallots, I'll add whatever the ingredient is, and then I'll deglaze, which is just a little, what's that?
Can you deglaze with any liquid? Because I've only heard
Yeah.
it done with alcohol.
Oh no, I deglaze all my veg, gets deglazed with chicken stock, depending on what I'm doing. If I'm doing an Asian preparation or I want to add acidity, it usually does two things. It's going to get the fond off the bottom of the pan, and then I'll scrape it around and move it to scrape that stuff up. It's going to add acid and it's going to add color. So keep those in mind. Like if you want something to be a nice white sauce, but you still want flavor, maybe you don't want alcohol. And alcohol, after it cooks off, they tend to get sweet. So maybe you deglaze with citrus juice. You know what I mean? We use a lot of fresh lemon juice, fresh lime juice. And alcohol-free Alfredo, you could just as easily use lemon juice and then adjust the acidity at the end with a little sugar. So that's another thing. When I cut something, did you guys notice that the shallot, I peeled, and then before I started cutting it, I made it flat. Whenever you guys are cutting onions or whatever else at home, keep this in mind. So if this was an onion, this would be the top where the thing grows to the ground, and this would be the root end at the bottom. So most people are like, slice it and then try and take those round things and chop that up, and then, oh, they're not square. How do they get them square? The first thing we always do is we make it flat, so we don't do what I did. After that, I'm going to cut little rows in it. And the reason I cut rows in it,
That black thing is in kind of.
my steel.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going to move the butter too. In case anybody's in- And my towel. Chef, everything is in the way. You guys are killing me. You guys are killing me.
That part.
This? Oh, this.
I can't see.
I'm sorry. And the broccoli. It's my first cooking demo. You guys are.
We can see right through the oil.
Okay, I'm gonna move the oil. There we go. I have nothing in front of me. So you lay it flat, and we cut parallel through, and that's because the onion or the shallot or whatever goes around like this. So I need to cut lines like this. So then I'm going to go back through and cut lines the opposite way. Now, sharp knife, yes, that's super important. I'll touch on that later. Now you can see that it's already, without cutting through the root, it's already little rows. Now to dice it, I just cut across. And now I have these cute, perfect little squares, and everyone's like, how do you do that? That's how you do that. Super important, it makes everything look nice. Like if you're gonna leave the onions or whatever vegetables in your dish, It makes them all look the same, which is pretty. We like symmetry. The other thing it does is it's going to allow for even cooking. Okay, everything is going to cook the same amount of time. When you have things that are different shapes and sizes and you put them in a dish, they half of them can be cooked and the other half will be raw. People will be like, what's wrong with this? I just got a raw onion. And everyone's like, my onion's mush. That's weird. So that's why we do that. Any questions so far? No? Great. Now, green vegetables. I can't do this yet because I didn't bring another pot. Maybe I did. Put some water in it. Is everyone familiar with blanching?
Yeah.
Who can tell me what blanching is?
Like,
Like, oh, I know what it is. What is it?
Boil it for just a short amount of time, then you get it cold, so it doesn't cook.
Yes. So, if you didn't hear, she said boil it for a short amount of time and then get it cold. That's what we call blanching and shocking. If you ever wonder how you go into restaurants and you get these bright green vegetables that are seasoned all the way throughout, but they're still kind of crisp, that's blanching. A couple things that people miss on blanching, it's real basic. My cooks miss this all the time. What happens is restaurant service is coming around and it's like 4 o'clock and they're like, oh chef, I need more broccolini. I'm just gonna throw it all in this big pot of water and then it'll be done. Nope. Thomas Keller, the chef of the French Laundry, who Chef Jason Porter and I are big fans of, that's my boss, has an article in his cookbook, The French Laundry, called Big Pot Blanching. And it's like a whole page. And there's some basic fundamentals about that a lot of people miss that they don't think matter. They're huge. A large amount of water and a little bit of vegetables. If you gotta blanch vegetables like 6 or 8 times to get through one package of green beans, fine. And people were like, well, how much water? If you're not sure, use what they call the pasta method, which is a ratio of 8 parts water to 1 part whatever you're gonna put in the water.
wow.
Yeah. So what I would normally do for this much broccolini is I would have a pot somewhere between this tiny pot and this really, really big pot. Really, really big pot is better. In the interest of time, I'm gonna do it one at a time in this tiny little pot. That's the first thing. The second thing is water needs to be at a rapid boil every single time you put something in it. So if you got a whole bunch of, perfect example, I recently had a shoulder surgery over the Christmas break, and my lovely mother came down to take care of me. And I had just bought a bunch of produce right before I got hurt, and I didn't want it to go bad. I'm like, Mom, I gotta go to work. Can you blanch these green beans off for me? She's like, yeah, and then I went, Mom, do you know what blanching is? She's like, yeah, I know what blanching is. Same thing. She's like, boil the water, throw the veggie. I'm like, yeah, great. And I assumed that my mother would throw the green beans in a little bit of time. No, she got a big pot of water, let it boil, threw all the green beans in, and then was like, here. And they looked great. They weren't cooked all the way through, and they turned brown in like a day. So what happens is the water's super hot, and then you add something to the water, and it cools down. So if you add too much vegetables to the water and it cools down too fast, it's going to leach all of the chlorophyll out of those vegetables while not cooking them. So to leave them in to get cooked long enough, now the chlorophyll comes out, now they're like grayish, and everybody's like, ew, that's nasty, what's wrong with that? So small batches, rapidly boiling water every time. You got to do it 4 times, perfect. 5 times, even more. The other thing is where'd that box of salt go? Season the water. Oh my goodness, don't be shy. Don't be shy. You think it's going to be salty, it won't be salty. The other thing that's in the article about big pot blanching is the water should taste like the ocean. That's salty. If you're wondering how salty, tastes like the sea. If you haven't been to the sea, go down to Kincaid Park, get out there, stick your finger. maybe not in that water, but it should be fairly salty. You should taste it. The reason is through a process called osmosis. Osmosis is vegetables, like everything else, has pores, right? Your skin has pores. The heat opens up the pores. It's going to do 2 things. It's going to pull the chlorophyll to the surface. It's going to pull the salt in. It's not going to pull all the salt in. Osmosis is everything wants to be equal, right? So there's no salt inside the vegetable. There's a bunch of salt out here. It's going to pull salt in and take chlorophyll out. It's not going to pull it all in the amount of time you're going to have it in the water. But then what you have is a vegetable that's seasoned evenly throughout, inside and out. So you can blanch it, keep it in the fridge, and use it in salads for the next 4 or 5 days. You don't even have to cook it. And it'll be perfectly seasoned and it won't be too salty.
Do you have to put, for the next batch, you have to put more salt
Nope.
in, or it's just, okay.
Nope. If you're gonna do a different kind of vegetable, depending on how much you do, it is good to change the water out. You know, if my cooks are gonna do, we'll do stuff like, if we're gonna do a white vegetable, or like we're gonna do carrots, and then we're gonna do a bunch of green vegetables, we'll start with the carrots, maybe we'll do one green vegetable, and then we'll switch the water again. I don't let them blanch different color vegetables. Like if we're gonna do mustard greens, and we're gonna do green beans, and we're gonna do broccolini, depending on the amount and how much time we have, I'll use the same water for all 3 of those. But then I won't go back and do tomatoes in that water. Tomatoes are gonna, green vegetables have chlorophyll, they have lots of oxalic acid. Oxalic acid is, you ever eat sauteed spinach and you get that weird flavor in your mouth, kind of that like coating? That's oxalic acid. Lots of green leafy vegetables have it, kale, spinach.
All the healthy ones.
Yes, all the healthy ones. Leafy greens are very good for you, by the way.
Yes.
What about like steamed versus blanched? Why blanched?
I like blanched because, so what I'm doing in the restaurant is I'm getting everything ready so that when you order your food, I can cook it to order, but it's not going to take as long as if I actually blanched it to order. If I blanched your food to order, you'd be sitting there for 2 hours for 2 courses, probably.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean? Maybe not. Some places higher end, they have more people, and there is somebody that's just like, oh, an order, let me get the vegetables, I'm blanching them, I'm shocking them, now we're going right in the pot. So I blanch them so that I can hold them, and they're still crispy, and they're seasoned, and they're bright. Now they're not going to take as long to cook, they're fully seasoned, and I can cook your food to order, but it's not going to take me as long. So that's why on the blanching. Any other questions about blanching? Yes.
You said then you're going to cook them, so you have your blanched, and then what do you do next, or will you be going?
That's what I was talking about with the. So I would take some shallots, some oil,
Okay.
add the veg, and I'll go back into that.
No
These
problem.
boil soon.
Now, when you're shocking vegetables, you mentioned 8-to-1 ratio for water to vegetable.
That's in the pot. Lots of ice, a little bit of water.
Yeah.
Because as you add the vegetables to the ice water, the ice is gonna melt. Then the water cools down. The point of that is to stop the cooking process. You get them right where you want them, throw them in a bath of ice water. Another thing you can do is throw them in a strainer, put ice on top of them, and run cold water over them. Nothing cools stuff faster than ice water. We're like, oh, I put it in ice. It's not as good as ice and water. It's gonna cool stuff faster.
So the 8-to-1 ratio is really just for the boiling.
Really, just for the boiling, yeah. When this comes to a boil, I'm gonna go to the ice, put all the ice and a little bit of water, and I'll probably do 2 or 3 batches, even for this small bunch, because it's a very small pot. Questions so far? No? All right. Who's used duck before? Like 5 people. Okay. So you can find duck, and I'm gonna start scoring these a little bit. You can find duck in town sparingly. C&J Tender Meats on International. We buy a lot of stuff from them. The guy's name is Tim. Super helpful, super nice guy, but it's more of a wholesale outlet. Natural Pantry has lots of variety meats. If you're looking for grass-fed options, if you're looking for organ meats, geese, duck, they carry a lot of that. I notice Fred Meyer and Safeway have it sometimes, but a lot of their things like duck or quail, if they have it, are usually processed. Like it's like, ooh, vacuum sealed duck, half cooked, and all this marinated stuff with a bunch of sugar added in. So in that regard, I would rather do all that myself. So those are the places I know of in town. Also, the Asian markets tend to have a lot of variety meats. New Central, and then there's a lot of them popping up. But man, they got some cool stuff. Sometimes I just go in there and, what is this? I wonder what this is. I'm gonna buy it. Doesn't always work out, but it's a learning experience either way. So what I'm doing now for this duck,
Are those the breasts, I guess?
these are duck breasts, yes.
And they have a lot of fat. I didn't realize that. That's quite a lot.
So duck, well, it's deceiving. Duck looks really fatty. It's fatty on the outside. The meat is super lean. So it's kind of this conundrum. People are like, oh, it's really fatty. And the general rule with proteins is if it has a lot of fat, it can take a lot of heat. It'll stand up to it. You know what I mean? You could overcook salmon and it's still pretty good. Still pretty good. I mean, if you really overcook it, it's bad, but you can cook it to medium well. And it's still pretty moist, large fat content. Tuna, no fat, terrible. Terrible. I mean, some people, when you come into the restaurant, you order a mid-well tuna, just know that every cook back there is like, oh, who is this person? They talk to the fish like, I'm so sorry, buddy. You say, I have to. It's serious. When I was a cook, I did it, and then I realized that, hey, people want what they want what they want, and they're paying for it. But as a cook, and you spend all this time trying to make it what you think it should be, and somebody else is like, I think it should be mid-well. There's a little apology session going on before we cook your mid-well steak.
So did you debone it like that, or did you buy
I
it?
bought these duck breasts like this. You come 4 to a pack. You can buy whole ducks. I was gonna bring a whole duck. We didn't have any, and I didn't have time to get any. But you can do the same thing with chicken. You can buy a whole chicken and take the breasts off. Save the legs for soups and stews. You can roast the thing whole. Chickens are great for that. If you want to know how to make moist chicken, put it on a sheet tray in the oven with some salt and pepper on the outside and bake it at 350 until the legs come off. So you can gently pull the leg. Awesome. Super moist, super tender. People be like, what did you do? Tell them it's family secret. They're not going to know. You're like, I didn't do anything. The chicken did the work.
So can you tell us the difference between this says thighs, you're using thighs in here, and that's the breast. So how are they
The thighs,
different
okay,
in flavor?
that is...
Or
So the recipes that you have are the recipes for the restaurant. The thighs we use for the duck confit. Does anybody know what confit means? Confit is a French term that means cured and poached in its own fat. So what they would do in France is they would take the ducks, they would eat the breasts right away,
that's pâté.
and then they would take the legs and cure them in salt and sugar and some spices, and cook them in duck fat. You know, ducks are super fatty. They'd render down all the duck fat from the skins, put it in a pot, put the duck in it, put it in the oven and bake it. And then they would just take that and put it in the fridge and let the fat congeal. And so between the curing and the cooking it in its own fat, it would preserve it. And they'd leave that in there for 3 months. Pull out a piece of duck, eat it. The fat cap on that dish is going to keep the oxygen out. So if you got stew at home, or how many of you got a crock pot that you use? Right? You do that crock pot and you put it in the fridge and it gets that fat cap. Everyone's like, ooh, I got to get that off of there. Leave that on there. That's protecting what's underneath from everything outside. It'll last longer if you just leave it in there like that than if you take that fat off and put a lid on it.
On the confit, is there any fat that you could substitute for the
Any fat at all. Olive oil, chicken fat, beef fat, Crisco. Not that you'd want to do that, but if you're frying stuff at your house and you don't want your house to smell like whatever you're about to fry, use Crisco.
Do not use Crisco.
Poison.
It is poisonous. The reason
Coconut.
it doesn't make your house smell though is because it's been purified. So all those free radicals, like when I cook at home, I don't cook with Crisco. I cook with coconut oil and I cook with butter. Grass-fed cow butter is better than regular butter, but it's really hard to find. But I notice as soon as I'm done cooking, I smell like whatever I just cooked. And so does the whole house, and so does my jacket and my hat. So if you're frying fish, a purified oil, like Crisco or lard, baking lard,
Coconut oil.
coconut, it'll still make the house smell. A little bit. I cook with coconut oil all the time. And as soon as I'm done, I just smell like whatever.
So what are you doing when you're scoring the duck?
Okay, so scoring the duck. These ducks are really fatty. These ones are already seasoned. You see the crosshatch marks? Couple things. It looks pretty. So many things we do are because it looks pretty. The other thing is, there's a lot of fat on the duck, right? And fat equals flavor, and it's really good, but no one wants a mouthful of fat. So I want this to be crispy. So to get it crispy, I'm going to score it, and that creates lines for the fat to run off. As the fat runs off, it's going to keep crisping, and then it's going to kind of pan fry itself. Then I have that fat, I can save it and re-cook with it, or I can throw it away. Whatever I want to do. But that's why. It helps it release fat. Otherwise, it's going to take a really long time, and I'm never going to get it as crispy as I had it when I cross-hatched it. All right. Ice. Excuse me.
I got lots of information.
So yes, your recipe says duck confit. To do the duck confit, we'd be here for 3 or 4 hours. So we're not going to demo the confit, but I will go over it. What we do with our duck confit is we take the thighs, which we buy separately. You can buy duck thighs separately, or you can buy a whole duck. If you've got whole birds, you can do this with chicken too. Chicken confit is amazing. Pretty much anything cooked in its own fat for a long amount of time is amazing. So we take it and we cure it. A lot of times in restaurants, people are like, oh, what's the recipe? We don't use as many recipes as we use ratios. The ratio that I tell my cooks whenever we're doing a cure on something, I'm like a standard cure. Standard cure is 2 parts salt to 1 part sugar. And then I'll add whatever else I want it to taste like. Excuse me, let me make sure this isn't my kitchen burning down.
Uh-oh.
It is my work. It must not be important. They're calling from the front desk. No one ever calls me from the front desk. So 2 parts salt, 1 part sugar. And in my duck confit, I add whole garlic, thyme, and juniper berries. Juniper is a traditional spice to use on duck. A little bit goes a long way. If you go get juniper berries, they're gonna look like really big peppercorns or allspice berries. Don't go crazy. Maybe like 2 or 3.
Should that be ground or?
Yeah, I would normally toast it. I'd put it in a pan and just toast it till it gets really fragrant. After that, I would grind it up in a coffee grinder or a blender. You don't, if you have a Vitamix, you have a spice grinder, you have all kinds of things that normal people would have like 6 different utensils for. Just get a Vitamix. So rapidly boiling. It's salty. I'm gonna put 3 of those in there for now. And if you're not sure, it's better to err on the side of less than more. Okay? If you think 3 might be pushing it, then do 2. The worst thing that's gonna happen is you gotta do a couple more. Couple more times. So back to the confit. And then I cure it for like an hour. Not a long time. But I take each one and I would pat them in the salt sugar mixture and then lay them out on a cookie sheet or stack them on top of each other in a pan and put them in the fridge for an hour. Take them out, rinse them afterwards. If you're doing this with like you do it with chicken thighs, cure them for an hour, set a timer. It's another thing me and my mother argue on. I'm like, did you set a timer? She's like, I was gonna remember, and then you started talking to me, and I forgot. Like, that's right, Mom. You didn't set a timer. I know. Don't worry about it. After an hour, take them out, rinse them, and then you can kind of let them hang out overnight. You don't have to cook them right away. The curing process is part of the preserving. It's gonna remove moisture. It's gonna pull those flavors in. They're not good to go forever, but say you get a bunch of duck legs and you don't want to cook all of them, you can certainly cure all of them at once. And then freeze the rest, and then pull them out and be like, okay, I'm going to do a different type of confit.
When you say hang out overnight, you mean out of the refrigerator?
No. In the refrigerator.
Okay.
You probably could, but I'm not really an authority on that yet. I do it with some things. I make kimchi at the restaurant, and we let it sit out for about 6 hours. But that's one, because of laws in the United States. Two, because we want it to be quick. We want it to get a quick fermentation and then arrest that bacterial growth. Okay, boiling again. Now I'm going to go back and put some more in. Does everybody know what temperature technically is poaching? People say poach. What temperature is that? It's 160 degrees to 180 degrees is what they taught me in culinary school. Correct oven temperature to maintain, basically you want to maintain a simmer. Everybody's got a different idea on what a simmer is. My culinary instructors told me a simmer was 1 bubble every 3 seconds. It's a good way to tell. I'm like, how many? Okay, I'll just watch this pot for a while. A general rule of thumb for a simmer is a bubble every 3 seconds, but the oven temperature to maintain a simmer, 325. So take the duck legs that you've got cured or the chicken legs or whatever, cure them for an hour, rinse it off, pat them dry. You're gonna have a bunch of schmutzy liquid at the bottom of your confit. And then you can cover with olive oil. You could do it in butter. You could do it in coconut oil. Any type of fat. What's that?
Avocado oil.
Avocado oil, walnut oil, any type of fat. And that's all it is you're cooking it in its own fat to flavor it and to preserve it. So, at 325, it would probably take, depending on how many you did, I'm going to say 1 to 3 hours, depending. And you want it till it's falling off the bone, roughly, but not falling apart. You know what I mean? You pick it up, and you can pull meat off it super easy. It's done. More questions about the confit?
Yeah.
Yes.
You've left the skin on, right?
Yes. Yes, and I used to sear the skin before. I would put them all in the pot, skin side down on everyone. And then after all that, and that was to pull the fat out of the skins. And then it would kind of pan fry itself and they'd get crispy, and then I would add the duck fat on top. I don't do that anymore. I find for what I'm using it for, it's really time consuming and labor intensive, but it does taste a little better. What I do is when I get the duck out of the confit, I take the skin off, I save the meat, we throw the bones away, and then I take the skin and put it on a cookie sheet. I say cookie sheet, I put it on a sheet tray, but at home you can use a cookie sheet. And then I put another cookie sheet on top of it, and I bake it in the oven until it's crispy like chips. And you have confit duck skin chips, which are amazing. Anthony Bourdain says all evolved cultures in the world have something that they cook with the skin. You see when he goes to Japan, they have the tataki skewers of fried chicken skin that they grill. It's really good. Yes?
I get field dressed ducks without any skin. Could I use bacon?
Yeah. Use bacon anyway. Why wouldn't you use bacon?
Well, because I think bacon, I don't like the taste of bacon and everything. But I'm just listening to you. I mean, that's one of the problems I have is I don't get any fat.
I was gonna mention that when you said wild game. The problem with wild duck as opposed to farm raised duck is they have a big machine that plucks these little buggers. Right. And if your husband's out hunting duck and he comes home with a bunch of duck, he's not gonna want to pluck them, and I bet you're not gonna want to pluck them either.
No, I just get these bare birds.
Yeah. So, that's an interesting problem that I used to have. I would grouse hunt. I'm from Delta Junction originally. No jokes, please. Yeah, see, you guys were thinking it. It's like, Delta? Oh my goodness. That is the problem with wild game. Grouse, ptarmigan, duck, geese, is that there is a lot of fat. But to get to that fat, you have to pluck them, or don't. You know, I have a friend who's a bird hunter that I work with, and they have a big pot of paraffin during bird season, boiling on the pan, and then they dunk them, and they said they did it once. And they're good on that probably forever. So it's a lot of work to process to save that fat. The other thing is, those geese and those ducks don't have somebody coming by to feed them a big ration of grain every day. So even if you did go through all that trouble, you're not going to get as much fat as these are going to have on them. So that's another problem with wild game, is it's better for you. A lot of times it's more flavorful, but it has less fat. All right, and then this water goes
How long do
away.
you cook those for in there, just to till they're?
What's that?
How can you tell when they're done?
When they're bright green and they're still kind of
Oh,
like, see it kind of snapped.
all right.
It's about 30 seconds. And if you do it in small batches, the water should, by the time the water comes back to a boil, pull it out. That's a good rule. If you're not sure, if you put it in and the water's come back to a boil, then it's ready. Or the other thing you can do, and I find a lot of home cooks don't do this. Excuse me as I turn my back on you. Is taste it, pull it out, take a bite. If it's well seasoned and crunchy, but not too crunchy, you know. And your personal preference is going to dictate that. Just because I say this is how to do it doesn't mean that's how to do it for you. The only place it means that is in my restaurant, which is another conversation I have to have with my poor cooks all the time. They're like, but I think it's like this. I'm like, yeah, I bet you do. And one day when you're all grown up and you're the chef of your own restaurant, you can make it however you want. But here, I'm sure any of you have children? Children? No? It's a lesson in parenting, being a chef. Any questions before we move on to the breast?
I
Yes.
just wanted to ask you about that ice bath. Did you just keep adding the broccolini without taking the previous batch out?
I did.
So
Because there's one bunch of broccolini and here, I'm going to put this up. Feel free to come and look at it. There's one, and can anybody see in this mirror? There's one bunch of broccolini to this whole container of ice. If I had been doing several bunches, I would have taken them out bunch by bunch.
okay.
You're right, because the longer you leave those in there, the more the ice is going to melt, which means your water bath is going to heat up, which means it's not going to stop your vegetables from cooking.
You think they stop cooking?
Huh?
Point. They're done cooking.
Oh, yeah. Now right now, I've started to render the duck breast. I'm going to show you guys one, and then maybe we can do some Q&A, and I'll plate a bunch of these, a little sample. But how many people have cast iron at home? I don't even have cast iron. It's expensive. I'm waiting for my parents and my grandparents to will it to me. Well, you come on down. I would love all the free cast iron you can give me. Okay. The thing with cast iron, and if you don't have cast iron, see how this pan's a little bit thicker than this one? A thick bottom pan will hold the heat longer. So it doesn't have to be a frying pan per se if you're gonna render something, and that goes with anything fatty that has the skin on it. It'll hold the heat. So I can put these three in there, but this pan's been on really low heat since we started. So now I'm gonna put them in here and they're gonna get crispy and they're gonna render, but the pan's not gonna cool down so much that now, you see a lot of people that put the proteins in the pan and it starts to stick. You know what I mean? Or it's too hot or it's too cold or it'll stick. That's why I use cast iron for this particular preparation, is because it holds the heat. So I can put 2 or 3 duck breasts in it and it's not going to cool down. It'll stay still at a low temperature but hot enough to keep rendering them and they're not going to stick. And as it renders, I don't know, can anybody see this? Can you guys see? What if should I hold it up to the mirror or is it better if I just kind of go like this? Huh? Okay. See, there's 3, but if you look at it, like, it's not burning, it's just kind of brown. And it's very slowly browning. Depending on what you're doing, you're either going to want low heat or high heat. The general rule is low fat content, high heat for a little bit of time. Steaks, for example. You get a tenderloin or a skirt steak or a top sirloin, really hot pan. Don't cook it for very long. Another thing to keep in mind is we really strive at the restaurant to cook all of our proteins from room temperature. So if you get home from the grocery store and you're doing steaks for dinner, you're like, oh, I gotta put the steak in the fridge. No. As soon as you get home, if you're having steaks or you're having fish, unwrap the fish, leave it out on the counter. Put the groceries away, tidy up the counter, get all your stuff ready, season it. It's just sort of happened in the last couple of years that I've been like, oh, this is a good idea, we should do this. I did a stage at a restaurant in Cave Creek, Arizona called Binkley's. If you're ever in Arizona, I recommend you eat there. It's an amazing experience. 50-seat restaurant inside a strip mall. I used to work in Phoenix, and several of the cooks that I worked with worked at this place. But
What is a stage?
a stage is where you go somewhere and you work for free. So I went, I showed up at 11 and I left at 1 in the morning, and I did not get paid on my vacation. That's how I spent my vacation. It was awesome. It was great. Yeah, I cut a whole 3rd pan of red onion brunoise, which is like those shallots. I cut a big rectangular pan. That's how I spent 2 hours. Yeah, it's to learn, and it's fairly common in kitchens to do that. Professional kitchens, anyway. It's also a good sign to tell if someone says, you know, your son or your brother or your sister or your aunt's like, oh, I want to be a chef. Be like, oh, why don't you go do a stage? And be like, what's that? As soon as you mention working for free, their response is going to give you a real good idea about how successful they're going to be.
You do that in yours?
Huh? I have a kid who worked at Southside Bistro who wanted to come work for me this winter. He is working for me now. I was like, all right, come do a stage. So he came in on Sunday and worked all day for free. And it's a good sort of, he gets to decide, like they get to decide if it's a place that they want to work, and you get to decide if there's someone you want to hire.
Yeah.
Imagine if everybody did that. Like, oh, you can work a day for free and then we'll talk afterwards.
Yeah.
You guys would be a lot happier workplace probably. So anyway, at there, they take all their proteins out and they bring them up to room temperature. So you're not shocking the protein. How many of you ever got a steak that's like brown, red, brown? You ever get that? A couple things happened. They probably cooked it from ice cold. Another thing they probably did is they didn't let it rest. Who's heard of resting? Resting, so I'm going to render these duck breasts. Then I'm going to sear the other side, then I'm going to let them sit without putting them in the oven. The general rule of thumb is you want to let it sit for about half the time that you cooked it for. So if you cook it for 10 minutes, let it rest for 5. And for those of you at home, that's gonna adjust your cooking temperature. Normally would cook it until it's done. I would pull it before I think it's done. Be like, okay, and what I'm planning on is I've cooked this for 5 minutes, I'm gonna let it sit for 2.5, so I would pull it 2.5 minutes before you. And that's, yes?
For baking, how long would you let like a turkey rest? You wouldn't do half.
I pull my turkey at 150 degrees.
Okay.
You know, the tag's like, oh, you need to cook it to 165. No, you don't.
30 minutes? Rest it, or?
Yeah, plan on 20 to 30 minutes. You know, I helped my mother cook Thanksgiving dinner, and she's like, we pulled the turkey out at 150 and let it sit, and it was beautiful. And then we let it sit covered for another hour, and then it wasn't as beautiful. So that's a good point, though. You bring that up. As soon as you take it out to let it rest, get it out of that hot thing, whatever it's in, pan, casserole dish, pull it out, take it out, and let it sit on the cutting board. And just let it sit there and do your other stuff. Yes?
I like my food hot though, and then that's my thing about letting it sit, is then by the time you get it on the table, it's not hot anymore.
So with that, I would make sure the serving, you have something that can stand up to heat. Take it out, let it rest. Or what you do is, if you know everyone's ready to eat, you can cook it twice. And what I mean by that is take it out, let it rest, and then be like, okay, is everyone on the table? I'm gonna pop this in for 5 minutes. We're gonna pour water, everybody sit down, we're gonna say grace, okay, and now it's hot.
Okay.
The other thing you can do is plan on it resting at the dinner table. So if you've cooked it for 10 minutes and it needs to rest for 5, and you're like, all right, everyone, sit down, you know, you do your thing, pass out the salad, pass out the mashed potatoes, and then in 5 minutes, it's rested on the table.
Okay, I'm not finished.
It's interesting you yes?
Although
No. I was about to talk, but
Yeah,
what's your question?
Well, I was gonna say, when you said 150, is that center breast?
Yeah. So on a 20-pound turkey, I would take a thermometer, put it either in the thigh bone, like right down the thigh bone, or along the keel bone of the breast, coming from the top. And your thermometers, if you look at them, they have a little dimple on them. Okay. That dimple is where it reads the temperature, not the tip. So look at that and be like, okay, here's the dimple. That's got to go to where you want to get the temperature from. And if you want an accurate temperature, the thickest part of the meat. So yeah, I would take it in the keel bone, slide it down. When it says 150, I would pull it out of the oven and let it rest. Let it rest and then pull the stuffing out, do whatever. Then come back to it in 15 minutes and slice it. And I try it. I bet you'll have amazing results. You'll be excited. How am I doing so far? Is this informative?
Yes.
Okay.
What heat is that duck on?
Huh?
How hot is that?
Super low.
Super low.
Question in the back?
Yes. Well, were you saying not to cover it when you have it rest?
I don't.
The barefoot contessa always covers it.
Well, I don't read a lot of Barefoot Contessa, but can you tell me a little bit about the recipe you're speaking of, and maybe I can shed some light on it?
He always says covers it with oil.
Oh, like, so she takes it out of the pan, though. Takes it out of the pan and cover it with foil? I bet if you go back, it says remove it from the pan and cover it with foil. That's to hold the heat. But it's not as much heat as if I left it in this and then covered this with foil, because this is really hot. But if you take it out, yeah, absolutely cover it with foil. That's, you know, this young lady said that she likes her food to be hot. That'll also help keep it hot, you know? So, it's, like I said, it's not wrong or right. That's the great thing about cooking, is there's no right or wrong way.
Well, it's the internal cooking that's correct, right?
Yes, and it carries over, and people are like, oh, the health department, I remember one time being in Fairbanks at the Princess going to a health seminar, and they're like, carryover cooking, I don't know if that works. And I looked at, I was like, you're teaching us about food and chemical reactions, and you don't think that that's a thing? If you don't think it's a thing, get a big hunk of something. Take a prime rib, for example, and stick a thermometer in it when you pull it out of the oven, and watch it. In like 20 minutes, it'll be 10 or 15 degrees hotter than when you pulled it out. And what it is that piece of meat is so big, the heat can only penetrate so far. So the heat has to penetrate the outside, right? And then it has to go into the middle. And it can only go in a little bit at a time. And this can't get hot until the part before it gets hot, etc., etc. So when this is 350, this is like 140. And that's where you have the advent of things like sous vide, cooking sous vide, which is French term for under vacuum. They cook it in a water bath. So we do that with our steaks, we do that with the veal, and we do that with the filet at the restaurant. I vacuum seal them in bags, and I put them in a 125-degree water bath, which is basically rare.
You sear it before or after?
After. So I cook that in a water bath until the whole thing's 125 degrees. After it's 125, I take it out and I'll cook it to whatever temperature you request. But the point is that the entire piece of meat is now rare. So if you order it medium rare, I only have to bring it up another 5 or 10 degrees. It's faster and it's more consistent. It's easier to control the temperature. That's the most difficult thing with cooking, is, especially proteins, is controlling the temperature.
Wait, did you say it was faster? Because I thought it took like hours for the sous vide.
Depending on the size of what you're doing, it's doesn't take. You know, if you were gonna sous vide a prime rib, yeah, that's gonna take a while. But an 8-ounce steak, maybe 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, but you can leave it in about 125 water bath as long as you want, right?
You could. You could leave it in there for days. Eventually it will break down, and they've done lots of tests, you know, they look at it and you're like, okay, at 2 hours it's this, at 4 hours it's this, at 6 hours it's that. Question?
I think it was down to the temperature with the water bath.
Yeah. The temperatures of the water, and what is like a sous vide is a immersion circulator is what they call it. It's basically a thermocouple, it's like a heat thing, on a circulating pump with a digital thermometer. and you set the thermometer at whatever you want the water to be at, and it circulates the water over that thermocouple so it's always at that temperature. So like in your, I'm sorry, question?
Oh, I was just gonna say, since this has got a lot of fat, so you're searing it or cooking it at a low.
Yeah, because I want to render this until it's crispy.
Okay.
And it takes, like, you see,
That's good.
can everyone see? Now it's crispy. Woo, it's hot.
But to sear a steak, because it doesn't
To
have
sear a
that
steak, we would do
layer of-
really high heat.
Okay.
So, and ribeyes, so let's talk difference between a ribeye and a New York, for example. New York's pretty lean. Okay, ribeyes are pretty fatty. I usually eat my steaks rare or medium rare, depending. I eat my ribeyes medium. And the reason for that is there's more fat in a ribeye. I think it's probably one of the most flavorful cuts of meat you can get. But to realize that potential, that fat has to render. So if you cook it, people who order rare ribeye, none of that fat's rendering. So it's like a gristly and kind of like greasy because none of that fat's rendered. But if you take it to medium, all that fat melts and the meat gets much more moist. Sorry. Oh.
So are you going to do the other side of the chicken breast in high heat then? Not chicken.
Duck? Let me get to that in just a second. Here's how we do the sweet potatoes. Which I have sweet potatoes here. That's a sweet potato. I forgot to put it in the oven. Maybe it'll be done in time, maybe it won't. The other thing you can do, and which I might do here, is set it right on the oven rack. You don't even need to dirty a pan.
And sweet potatoes are yams. I never know the difference.
What temperature?
Does it make a difference?
350. Give me 1 second. Your question again was?
You're going to do the reverse side of the high heat.
I did. So what I call is I kiss it. I just kiss it. Which is like, and then take it off. You can do it on higher heat. The thing with duck is see how they puffed up? Like they were all kind of level, and now it's like. It's probably rare. I'm gonna let it sit for a second, and then we'll flash that in the oven for you guys. But it's not gonna take very long to cook from now. Duck is really, really fickle protein. Like it takes some in the meat. I would call it the fish of the meat world. In that we talk about in the restaurant, fish takes more finesse to cook. Meat is more forgiving. Duck's not forgiving. It takes it can go from mid-rare to medium to overcooked, all in the span of 3 minutes. And it seems to take forever if you overcook one and you like have to start another one. Then it's like, oh man, I overcooked it in 2 minutes. It's taken 10 minutes to cook it back the way it was supposed to be. Your question about sweet potatoes and yams. So they're cousins, and yams are ruby or orange. Sweet potatoes are white and orange. So at this point, I think people have just stopped. You know, the box that I get, I order yams, and it says sweet potato yams.
Yeah.
What's that?
I don't know.
That's somebody trying to appeal to two markets, is what that is. Like, it's a sweet potato, it's a yam. It's both. Don't worry about it. You're fine.
All right.
You know what I mean? What you will notice is that sweet potatoes are starchier. So when I cook, we just put sweet potato on our menu, but I order what I order, and sometimes it's sweet potatoes and sometimes it's yam. I don't worry too much about it because, like you said, most people can't tell the difference, and the difference is really minimal. The flavor's really the same. The only thing you notice is, if you can see in this pot, I don't know if you guys can see how much I didn't add any liquid to this. There's a bunch. Can you all see down here? I'll come around. You see how there's that liquid in there? That's yam. Okay. Sweet potatoes generally don't have that much liquid, and that's for me what I find to be the big difference is the liquid content and the texture. If you cook them both correctly, both the same till they're done, take them out, process them like this. The yams will be a little bit waterier, and a little bit grainier, is what I find. Yes?
Why is that so pinky?
I don't know. I would say it was the water content of the actual yam.
No, you said that was finicky.
Oh, I think it's just the shape of it. It's really lean protein, like I said, but you have to render it. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking this. Let me grab a paper towel. You know, I've taken this duck, and I've had to get that skin crispy, right? So to get that skin crispy, that heat is still going into the breast. So that means one side of this duck is cooked more than the other side. That's why I only barely touch the other side, because I know I'm gonna glaze this with something sweet. I wanna crisp it up in the oven. And when I do that, I'm gonna have to add more heat to it. And it's already got more heat, not more heat than I want, but it's already got most of the heat that I want it to have. So that's why it's finicky. To get the skin crispy and to cook it medium rare is difficult. You don't have to cook it medium rare. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Everybody see? So it's crispy, but then if you look at the side, like this brown part, and that's actually how I cook salmon without overcooking it. I'll leave it on one side almost the whole time. Then I'll take it out, flip it real quick, pull it off, and let it set. But the heat to get it this crispy is still going into the duck breast. You know what I mean?
You just season the duck before you put it in. Was that just cooked with salt and pepper?
Yep. Most of the things that I do are just salt and pepper. People are like, oh, what did you put on that to make it taste like salt and pepper? You're like, really? And what you find is you realize a lot of people maybe don't use salt and pepper. They think they do, but either they don't or they don't use very much. I give it a good amount. The other thing, oh, I forgot to mention this. So I'll bring over this other pan I've got real quick. And I'm going to season all of these. But I learned this in culinary school, and it was told to me that it's super important. So here's my duck way down here. I'm not going to do this. I'm up here. Okay? Huge. Huge. This is another thing I have to teach cooks because they don't know. They'll be like, and the difference is, I'm going to make a mess on the counter here. So there's the salt, right? Much more, that salt's all kind of in one spot. This salt is evenly spread throughout. Chef Linda Winecoop, who was my AM a la carte instructor at culinary school, but she used to work for an Austrian guy that would come around to your station and like grab your hand and scream at you. 2 feet! Like grab her, and she was this tiny, sweet little lady, like this tall. And I'm like, really? He screamed at you? And she's like, it doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl, if you're big or you're small, yeah, he screams. And so since then, I'm always up here, not down here. I would say the one difference to that is if you see a lot of these salt stores popping up, a lot of these specialty things. Finishing salts, if I'm doing foie gras or something and I'm finishing, then I'm right down on it. Because I'm being very precise about where I want that salt to go. We're gonna jump on in here, please.
Yeah, we're going to give away a gift card to the Glaciers. Would you be my guest?
If you're gonna do it with the wild geese, you should at least try and get just the thighs plucked. So it's better if the skin's on. But you can do a couple things. At the restaurant, what I do, and it's sort of a refining thing, we want to think about how you're gonna eat the whole dish. You know, so I have 2 dishwashers that when I pull the cooked duck out, it's usually about 7 o'clock or in the middle of service. They take it, they let it cool down, then they take it out, lay it on a sheet tray, pull the skins off, they save the skins for me, then they pull all the meat off, throw the bones away, and then after they've pulled the meat off, they go back through it with a fork. to shred it. So it's like chimichanga meat. You don't have to do it. A friend of mine, Chris Ricciaro, used to be the chef at Jack Sprat. He did a beer dinner, a wine dinner with duck confit, and it was the whole thigh. And he confit it, and then he just flashed it in the oven or seared it in a pan and put it on top of the salad. You can do it like that. He had taken the bone out, which once they're cooked, the bone comes out really easy. So you can serve it as a dish on its own, or you can break up the meat and use it in whatever you want. You can put it in omelets, you can put it in burritos. It makes an amazing burrito. If you ever had a duck confit burrito, you're doing something right.
Here's how it's going to be used for the cinnamon jus recipe.
What's that?
If you have the cinnamon jus recipe where it says like 6 duck carcasses, I don't know where I'm going to find that.
Okay, so I'm glad you asked. And I meant to bring it. It's been a hectic weekend, and so I didn't have a chance to grab it. If you can get a whole duck, that's best. And what you would do is season the bones a little bit, salt and pepper, and roast them in the oven, right, till they get good color. About 350. I use 350. If you're ever using a recipe and it doesn't say a temp, I would go with 350. That's what I go with. Till it's as colorful as you want it. The darker it is, the more flavor it's going to have to a point. If you notice that the fat is rendering off your duck carcasses and starting to smoke, pull them. Because once the fat reaches the smoke point, it means it's starting to break down, and then it's going to get to a point where it's bitter or tastes burnt. If you feel like you don't have time to keep an eye on it, or you don't want to burn it, you can go at 250 or 300. You know what I mean? The lower temp you're going to do, the less you're going to have to keep an eye on it, but you're always going to have to keep an eye on it. Chicken bones work. Duck bones work. You can get oxtail or beef bones from the store and use that. And what the bones are for is to add body. They add a duck flavor. They also add body to your stock, i.e. gelatin. The other thing you can do is take all the vegetables from that recipe and build it that way. Maybe throw the duck trim. That's another thing. If you clean up the duck breast and you're cutting pieces off, throw the trim in there. Meat first, like trim first, high heat, a little bit of oil, get color on that, okay? Color on whatever scrap it is, if it's beef scrap, if it's pork scrap, chicken scrap. And you can make a quick sauce like this all day at home. Get the scrap in there, get color on it, season it while it's getting the color, because that is, the color is called the Maillard reaction, and that's the process of sugars caramelizing, which creates, I forget the scientific term for all these things. When you see like dipolyphenol or something, that's actually a flavor compound that occurs when you caramelize sugar that somebody has distilled in a laboratory and figured out how to make, they add to food. Like they're always mimicking a natural process. And that natural process is the caramelization of sugars. So you add the meat scrap or the bones or both and get good color on them and season them. Then I would add vegetables. Either if it's just shallots, if it's just garlic, if it's mirepoix. Who knows what mirepoix is?
Onion, wheat, parsnip.
There's onion and parsnip. Look at you. That's a white mirepoix. So it's celery, carrots, and onions. It's named after the Duke of Mirepoix. The chef of the Duke of Mirepoix came up with this mixture. It's 50% onion, 25% carrot or parsnip, 25% celery. I don't use celery because it has nitrates in it, which makes stuff bitter. I use leek. But yeah, and it can be any vegetable that you want to be in there. Just keep in mind all those are kind of neutral vegetables and they do go together. So caramelize your bones or your scraps, season them, add your vegetables. If you want it to be darker, you can add tomato product, fresh tomatoes or tomato paste, and then that would be where you would add the red wine. I think the recipe calls for port. Is there port on that one? Yeah. Okay, good. I should know that. Then, you know, when that gets colored, deglaze with that. When you deglaze with alcohol, let the alcohol cook off unless you want your sauce to taste like this. So what I do is I would add a whole bottle of port, and then I'm going to boil it until all the alcohol is gone. Okay? Once the alcohol is gone, there's still port in, then I'll add my stock. And when you add stock, you can make your own in a crock pot overnight, or you can just buy stock. The one thing you want to keep in is if you're going to use the stock to like cook your vegetables, then this is fine. If you're going to use it to make your own stock, get like the least amount of sodium stock you can, because as you reduce it, those flavors will concentrate. Okay? And then the other thing you can do is if you just use water and the meat scrap, you know those gravy packets? Those are awesome. I use, not at the restaurant, but at home, I use those gravy packets all the time. I strain off the liquid after I do my little thing. I whisk in a gravy packet. It's thick, it's seasoned. The one thing you probably don't do that you should start doing is finish it with a pat of butter. Right before you serve, whisk in a little pat of butter. It'll be delicious. Yes. Sauce, gravy, pretty much anything. Do I have volunteers? Anybody want to help with something? Yeah? Right this way. One more volunteer, maybe? Young lady? All right. I'm going to give each of you a paper towel. This is going to be you. This is tedious, but don't hate me. This is thyme. This is parsley. No Simon and Garfunkel references, please. Thank you, Doug. One of you, I just want the flowers, not the stems, on both. Just the flowers, not the stems. Okay? What was your name? Diva. Diva? And what was your name?
Yeah.
Kat? Thank you very much, ladies. Diva and Kat, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Now, some of you have been wondering what this giant thing is here. Does anybody know what this is? It's a sieve, yes. It's a drum sieve or a tammy.
Yeah.
I call it a tammy, and people are like, what's that? It's that. So another thing that makes my food different from your food, like if I was gonna make this at home, I would serve it the way it is right now. At the restaurant, however, I bake it until everything's done, and then I let them cool down, and then some poor schmuck, hopefully not me, has to take them and run them through a sieve.
Yeah, that's right. The guy who's there volunteering.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another thing that happens to the guy who volunteers. It usually starts out by, let's give this guy the worst jobs that we don't want to do. One, because either we're super busy, or two, we want to test and see how serious he is about working there. If he's serious, he'll be like, yes, chef, no problem, I got that, thank you. If he's not serious, he'll be like, oh, do I have to? And then that's kind of like, well, we don't really want to hire you. What's that?
Why are you doing that?
Why am I doing this? To remove all these little pieces of grainy...
It's good to eat.
Huh?
It's good
Fiber.
It is good to eat. But this is how I do it at the restaurant. Like I said, if I was serving it at the house, I would serve it like this. At the restaurant, we do it like this. And it goes back to a finer texture in your mouth. You know, you come into the restaurant, you're like, man, what do they do with those sweet potatoes? They were so creamy and smooth. Like, well, we bake them, and then we whisk them, and then we pass them, and I'm going to cook them again. And you're like, oh, forget about it. That's too much trouble. That's the only difference is I have resources you don't have, like 3 kids that are washing dishes and nothing to do. My dishwashers are awesome. I got to say, I have 3 of the best kids working for me that if it wasn't for their cell phones, they'd be perfect. Come back. We'll be going down. No one has a pan to cook with, and they're back there like, yeah. And so then I was like, check this thing out on Facebook. Like, what are you guys doing? Do you know what's happening right now? But they do seriously. If you meet someone that washes dishes, just say thank you, because they've probably cooked more of your food than half the cooks that you know. They do so much. They're amazing people.
My wash is wonderful.
Yeah. So, how many people don't like sweet potatoes? Yeah. Why don't you like sweet potatoes?
They're too sweet.
They're too sweet. You know why they're too sweet? Because somebody's probably trying to do too much. So people are like, oh, these sweet potatoes are amazing. What did you do? My answer is generally nothing.
Yeah.
I don't add marshmallows to it. I don't add maple. I don't even add maple syrup to it. I used to.
Brown sugar.
Too sweet. Don't even do brown sugar. Butter, salt, and 5 spice. Sweet potatoes are sweet enough. And you'll notice in America, everything, and a lot of people that come here from other countries notice that the food here is much sweeter than where they're used to.
It's saltier.
And saltier? Sweeter and saltier. Did you come here from somewhere else? Have you been abroad? Did you come from somewhere else? Or? Germany. Right? A lot sweet, like noticeably sweeter and saltier, right? Food doesn't taste like food, it tastes like salt and sugar. And so that's why, especially, I notice this with my friends that have kids, is they'll go out and be like, where do you want to eat? Do you want to try this? Like, I don't like it, it doesn't taste very good, I want this processed food. Because the processed food has a bunch of sugar in it.
Yeah.
A ton of sugar. Awesome, thank you so much. That was fast. Oh my God.
You could hire her.
That was faster than half of my cooks.
And she also remembered to wash her hands.
I know. What are you saying? Did I forget? Like, man, I thought I washed them. Maybe I didn't. So yeah, salt and sugar. American foods, a lot of them are very widely processed, and a large part of that process is adding sugar to stuff. It started with the Kellogg brothers. One Kellogg brother didn't want to add sugar to his cereal, the other one did. The one that did made a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Because people were like, oh man, this tastes better. What is it? It's sweeter. But you want to keep things in balance. So things like sweet potatoes, it's not just a catchy name. They're sweet. So I'll add a salt. I'll add butter. Butter is an amazing thing that marries flavors together and it'll help carry flavor through a dish. So if you're tasting it and you're like, oh, it's too acidic, or oh, it's not salty enough, something else, put a little piece of butter in there. Then taste it again.
Salted butter?
What's that?
Salted butter?
I use unsalted. You can use salted, that's just as good, but keep in mind that your butter's got a little bit of salt in it. The butter I use in my house is I use grass-fed cow butter for everything. Because, I don't know, does anybody eat paleo here? Yes. Yes? You? I figured when you were like, coconut oil.
Yeah.
So, grass-fed beef is one of the healthiest things you can eat.
Where do you buy it here?
Natural pantry. Occasionally you can get it at Fred Meyer's, but that Simply Organic stuff is generally like a grass-fed cow. Or it's generally like a feedlot cow that's just been given a grass ration. If you want like cow, like that walked around outside and eating grass, you have to search for free range and grass-fed, which is super difficult. Or there is a cattle ranch just south of Kodiak Island called, I think it's Sitkinak Island. They're like 600 head of organic free-range grass-fed Alaskan cattle. And
Probably ship them someplace else.
and Homer too, really. What's the name of that farm?
Japan.
I know there's a bunch of people out there, Mossy has some.
Is there? Awesome. Do they only do it once a year?
No, there's a meat locker there, you can go buy it anytime.
Thank you. I am. I am going to. Well, the guy in Sitkinak Island only kills cows once a year. So that's kind of a bummer. But you can go online and order, and they'll ship it to you, and they'll ship you things like the tongue, the heart, the bones for free. You don't pay for them.
Oh gosh. Wow. Such a deal.
She's excited. Everyone else is like, heart? Really? Yeah. Beef heart is amazing. If you got somebody that hunts moose and they don't keep the moose heart, oh man. Take the moose heart. If you don't want it, I'll take it. Send them my way.
What did you say?
Sitkinak Island. Look for Sitkinak Cattle Ranch on Google and it'll pop up. And then these ladies know somebody in Homer apparently. I gotta check that out because that's way closer than Kodiak.
Come buy a half cow, quarter cow.
Yep, same with him. In Sitkinak, you can go in on halves or quarters of cows.
Stuff out of Palmer, but I don't know if it's like truly grass. I mean, I just don't know.
That's the other tricky thing with the grass-fed is a lot of them all cows are fed grass until they go to slaughter. Then they're finished on grain. That is to make them, yeah, because we sell cows by weight, so they fatten them up with grain. And then don't get me started on grain. We'll be here for another 6 hours. At the restaurant, I save it, and I use it. I put it back in the confit fat. Here, I'm not. Unless, I mean, you can take it home. I can wring out that paper towel.
Oh, yeah. Still do.
Yeah, that's the only two we have in the whole restaurant. We have two, and I have one of them. I hope everything's going okay. I'm a little worried, to be honest. Valentine's Day weekend, a busy lunch, and I'm not there. Any more questions? I'm sorry, I realize this is starting to drag on.
No, very interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So I can reuse them without running them through the dishwasher. In the restaurant, I use sanitizer water, quat sanitizer, which is, you hear that beep? That's the restaurant calling. I use sanitizer water, which is what we. That is beautiful. That's perfect. You don't need to do it anymore. That's more than what you need. Thank you so much. At the restaurant, I use quat sanitizer, which is what we use for our, rags for cutting boards, all that. At home, I just do that. What's ideal? Excuse me. What's ideal is Binkley's, for example, and a couple of the other restaurants have ice. Those little ice cream things. It's like a spigot of constantly running water. They have those in every station on the table. So my dream place is just, they taste something and they put it back in there. Water runs over it, washes it off, and they're good to go for the next time. Huh? I'm gonna fill it up. Yeah.
Okay, you feed those with your grain comment now. You have to say at least 5 minutes worth of grain, whatever.
At least 5. Okay, so cows were meant to eat grass. They have 4 stomachs. Does everybody know a cow has 4 stomachs? Cows have 4 stomachs. Those 4 stomachs are meant to break down grass. People feed cows grain for a couple reasons. 1, they gain more weight faster. 2, it's cheaper. And we sell cows based on how much they weigh. However, gluten is a living, grains, especially gluten, are a living thing. It's a seed. Even though it's ground up, it's still alive. When it goes into your body, it's like trying to survive. So it's kind of poisoning you. It causes inflammation. It has lectins in it, which prevent your body from absorbing nutrients. Even the nutrients that are in the grain, it blocks that process. And so basically when you feed cows grain, all the animal fats generally are very healthy for you. They're high in healthy saturated fats. They're high in omega-3. When you feed them grains, they become not healthy. And that's why there used to be this big thing of people, 5 or 10 years ago, got on no more butter, it's terrible for you. Butter used to be really good. Yeah. People were eating butter and eggs and steak, that we actually lived longer. But that was 50 years ago when cows still ate grass. So that's part of the reason it spikes, gluten also spikes your insulin, your blood sugar, more than actual sugar. I don't know if a lot of you know that. There's a great book called Wheat Belly, written by a cardiologist. I haven't got it yet because my reading list is 8 books long. All you guys have 6 books that you're into the first chapter of?
Yeah.
What are we doing? 3 books until we're all the way through, no more. Yeah, me too. So that's on the list. But those are a couple things about grains. So when you feed, grass-fed cow butter is really high in omega-3 fatty acids, really high in butyric acid and CLA, which I don't remember what CLA stands for, but there's a great...
Linoleic acid.
What is it?
Conjugated linoleic acid.
Conjugated linoleic acid. And why is that good?
You have to have a ratio when you use oil.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the same kind of oil. You need a different ratio for it.
That's right.
And you omega-3, too much, it could be
So what you said?
So you need a different ratio of oils, and i.e. fats, when you eat them. Otherwise, they're not healthy. Like if you eat 100% omega-3s, not good. Even though people are like, oh, omega-3s are super healthy. Like if you eat all omega-3s, you're not healthy. If you eat too much omega-6, you're not healthy. You need a nice blend. And grass-fed cow butter has CLAs, butyric acid, omega-3 and 6 fatty acids, which are all, antioxidants, and they're all anti-inflammatories. Also, your body has the ability to manufacture glucose, which is what you run on, out of saturated fat. But to convert to that, you have to be, you have to go like 4 days of not fasting, but not eating glucose, not eating sugar is your main source of energy. So what happens is you're eating sugar, then you got to eat every 2 hours. You're eating healthy saturated fats, you can eat in the morning and not eat for the rest of the day and not starve yourself. Your body's just taking the saturated fat and breaking it down and converting it into glucose and distributing that throughout your body. There's a lot of great websites that I can tell you about when we get done here.
So do you eat paleo?
I do. Right now I'm doing the Whole Life Challenge, so I haven't had gluten and... I know it's bad for me, but if I could go by Johnny Chicago and get the Italian spicy beef cone roll every day, I would eat that every day, and I would probably be diabetic and die in like 5 years. But it's an amazing culinary feat, and once in a while, it's a nice treat. But yeah, right now I'm doing the Whole Life Challenge, so no grains, no sugars of any kind, no fruit juice. I eat all the whole fruits I want, but I can't eat any fruit juice. I can eat all the vegetables, all the fats that I want. Another thing to bring up, you mentioned healthy fats, olive oil. At the restaurant we cook with a blend of canola and olive oil. At home I only cook with coconut oil. I don't cook with olive oil. I use it, but I use it on salads and stuff.
That's a low smoke point or just like health thing?
Low smoke point, it's not super low, it is kind of low, but health benefits. When you eat olive oil raw, super healthy for you. When you cook it, it changes the fat structure from the good type of cholesterol to the type that sticks to your arteries. So when you...
And coconut doesn't do that?
Yeah. Salad and vegetables, awesome. Finishing stuff, like you're going to cook something then drench it in olive oil, awesome. You cook it in olive oil, changes the fat structure, and then it changes the cholesterol.
But the thing is not true for coconut.
No. No. Or palm kernel oil. I'm not sure about avocado. I don't cook very much with it. I find it kind of has a strong flavor. So I like something that's a little more neutral. I know palm kernel oil is good to cook with.
How about grapeseed oil?
Grapeseed, as far as I know, doesn't change. I don't think it has quite the highest smoke point, but it's really expensive.
Yeah. Oh, great.
All right.
I should always cook with it. My husband has a heart. Always heart problem.
See what I mean? Some poor schmuck has to keep doing this and doing this. I meant to have this done before. I do need a volunteer to go in that freezer and give me the giant block of, it says duck on it in little blue tape. Anybody? Anybody? Keep going, keep going, keep going. Right there. Nope, white one right next to it. Yep, top shelf, right hand side. Yep, looks like Jell-O. That's it. Thank you very much. Looks more like fudge. This is how I keep my sauces at the restaurant. I'm not making sauce every day. I make a big batch of, what happens at our butcher shop, we'll make veal stock. I'll butcher the duck, roast the bones, get the chicken bones, then do what you have in the recipe in front of you and then reduce it down. And then once it's reduced down, we chill it and freeze it. That way I don't have to make sauce every day. Otherwise, I would never not be at work. I would always be at work.
We're always looking for volunteers.
Always looking for volunteers. And what's interesting is you have to do that for a really long time. And once you get to a certain point, people line up to volunteer at your restaurant. There's a restaurant. Has anybody ever heard of Noma?
Yes.
Yes. You heard of, are you from Denmark? Oh. Keep trying to find somebody who's got an N in Denmark so I can go start. So Noma became rated the #1 restaurant in the world. Yeah, in 3 years. And what happened is a bunch of guys worked their butts off. Now they have a houseboat that's a food laboratory. Like people come from all over the world to work there for free to say, hey, I worked at Noma. So that's, if you wonder why there's no restaurants around here like that, it's because, one, there's probably not a market for it. Two, it takes an exorbitant amount of work to get to the point where people are lining up to work for you for free. Places like the French Laundry, places like Alinea in Chicago, Per Se in New York, all of them thrive off a few things. Wine sales, selling wine, and volunteers. They thrive off the reputation of their chefs. El Bulli, has anybody ever heard of El Bulli? El Bulli was the #1 restaurant in the world for maybe 10 years. It's the first time in almost 200 years that people invented new cooking techniques. And what I mean by new cooking techniques is like, yeah, I'm doing this with a sweet potato. I'm not the first guy to be like, but what if we passed it and then did something with it? This isn't a technique. They invented and still invent new cooking techniques. I think they closed now. They're closed. It's like chances to eat there are gone. I'm super bummed about it. But for 10 years, they were like innovators. They did a lot of work with molecular cooking, a lot of work using food additives that people would already use. You know, there's what's a good microwave sponge cake. Anybody ever seen that? You seen recipes for microwave sponge cake? Google microwave sponge cake, and you'll be like, what? You need a whipped cream container. But what you do is you make a quick sponge cake batter in a blender, and then you see, now look at it. And it's still a little moist. That's because it's yams, not sweet potatoes, but it's much smoother than it was before. What's that? No, and that's what I said at home. Like, if you were at home, if I was at home, I wouldn't do that. I just stir it with a whisk, take it out, and then season it with butter and salt. And 5 Spice. Somebody's reading that. What is that? 5 Spice? It's a Chinese seasoning blend. Let's see. I had to bring some from home because I forgot to grab it from work. This, I don't know if they all have the same stuff in them. This one has star anise, clove, cinnamon, fennel, which is probably fennel seed, and black pepper. Smells like baking spices. I mean, it is mostly, but it's not as sweet as baking spices. Is that going to be enough?
Yes.
Has anybody cooked with birch syrup before? No? Yes, question? You make your own birch syrup? Oh, you were raising your hand? That's a friend of mine's little brother made. He kept posting pictures because they have a bunch of birch trees up in Fairbanks. How long does it take?
It doesn't take very long. It's just, you have to, when you get it down, you know, it's 100 to 1. So you have to really
That 100 to 1.
water down to the gallons. You have to really reduce it, but when you're reducing it and you get it down that far, you got to wash it because it'll burn.
Yeah, it's like a caramel, right? When it's almost there, you can't leave it. 100 to 1. You guys must work so hard. I can't even imagine. What's that? Yeah. And a lot of time. Man, I can't. That's awesome. How many people use herbs at home? Herbs? How many people? Where is it? I saw it in here.
And those things in the summer to win gold.
How many people use this? Italian seasoning.
Yeah, I do.
Is that the herbs you use?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you're using herbs, fresh herbs, if you use herbs and you're like, oh, I put some thyme in it, or I put some dry thyme is one of the worst things in my life. People are like, oh, I put some thyme, and I'm like, it doesn't look like there's any thyme in here. Like, no, I use the dried stuff.
Yeah.
Oh dear God. If you're seasoning food that you're cooking to order, fresh spices. Dry spices are good for sauces, braises like spaghetti sauce. Use dry spices all the time. If you want it to really taste it, use fresh herbs and put them in right before it's done cooking. 15 minutes or less is the general rule of thumb for fresh herbs to be added to a dish. If you put fresh herbs in at the beginning, you're going to lose the flavor that makes them taste fresh, and sometimes they turn bitter, and they're going to discolor. So everything I do with herbs at the restaurant, with the exception of sachets, I do a thyme sachet in just about every sauce I make. The herbs go in at the end. Dry herbs go in at the beginning because they're dry. They take longer to release their flavor, and they're not quite as pungent. Like if you put them in at the end, you're not going to get the flavor out of a dry herb that you would out of a fresh herb. So just another thing to keep in mind: if you want it to taste fresh, use fresh herbs.
What about like a cure? You were talking about a cure earlier, using thyme in that?
I use fresh thyme.
What do you put in your thyme sachet besides thyme?
It's thyme.
Oh.
Sachet is just the thing that means
Oh.
tied up. I mean, you can go super technical, like a bouquet garni. My French isn't that great, sorry. Is like, I think it's leek, parsley stems, bay leaf, and peppercorn, and it's wrapped up in a leek stem, and they tie it and throw that in there. You can do that. I don't get too carried away with that, but do you need to do another drawing, Ray? I can stop talking.
Sure.
All right.
Keep on going. Let's see our second guest to Mardeb, John.
Bring in some grass-fed meat. I'll trade you. Trade you some moose broths for grass-fed steaks. What is it? McNeil Canyon Meat Company. Awesome. Thank you. I didn't know about that. I'm excited. All right. Gonna hit the parsley and the thyme. Now, I'm not going to cut this as fine as I do in the restaurant because that's about 10 minutes worth of cutting herbs. Again, it's another one of those things. People are like, my cook's always like, Chef, why do we have to cut the herbs so fine? I used to just say because I said so, but then I realized they were actually asking and not trying to get out of work. It's because I want to be able to season your food and have you not really notice that there's a big piece of herb in there. The other thing is terrible, especially Valentine's Day weekend, and you're sitting across from somebody and they just got a huge piece of parsley stuck in their teeth. Which, by the way, happens all the time in the restaurant, and I think one of the funniest social things, interactions about America is people are like, I didn't want to be rude, so I didn't say anything. What can be ruder than letting somebody walk around with just a grill of herb? It's terrible. Terrible. Lean in discreetly and be like, you have something in your teeth. So many times I've talked to people like, I've been here for hours and no one said anything. I'm like, well, you do, just so you know. The other thing is I want it to season the food, but it's an addition. It's not the main focus. Like if I was doing an herb salad, I wouldn't cut the herbs super fine. But as you'll see when I do this broccolini, it's just a pinch, just for flavor, and then it goes away. And I want it to go away texturally too. I don't want it to affect your meal in that sense. No, this is the parsley and the thyme. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. Oh, wow.
You want to watch me chop herbs? Surely you've seen. Come on. Somebody saw Emerald do this once, didn't they? I haven't said bam once.
Was
How
that
impressive is that?
lemongrass that you cut up first?
No, those were chives.
Oh, chives.
You combine them now?
Yes. Normally what I would do at the restaurant is I cut the parsley to match the size of the thyme. Then I cut the parsley and thyme together. Then I chiffonade the chive. And then I add that all together. Chiffonade is a French word that means really like thinly shaved or sliced. So when you see those really thin things of basil, like super thin slivers on pizzas and salads, that's chiffonade. And what they do is they take the basil and they stack it up on each, and then roll it, and then slice it as thin as they can.
Now the time is going to be hard to chiffonade.
Yeah, I don't chiffonade all the time. I just chop it up. That's an interesting. That's another thing we have the stage do. Like chiffonade me 2 bunches at a time. You're like, oh, okay. That's a really good indicator. Like, is this guy gonna like ask a question, or is he just gonna roll with it? If he just rolls with it, maybe he's somebody like that's an entry level position. Like, all right, he's gonna take some teaching, but we can work with that.
So you just put the time into this, right?
Yes. Yes, just the leaves though, not the stem. And you can't, like, if you're at home and it's just you or just your family and they're not, you can cut if the stems are tender. Here's the general rule that I tell my cooks: if the stems are tender enough, like if you're pulling the leaves off and the stem snaps, then it's tender enough to leave in there and just chop it up. But if you like gotta break it off like a tree, you probably don't want that in there. With what? No, it does not work with rosemary. You know what I feel? I just recently, when I was going to school, everybody would garnish stuff with a giant sprig of rosemary. And I had a teacher who hated it. He's like, I call it the sprig of death. He's like, well, all garnish should be edible. He's like, but can you eat that? He's like, I mean, I guess you could. It's a giant tree in your dish. So last night there I was garnishing the lamb on the tasting with a sprig of rosemary. It was baby rosemary though, so it was super fancy. All right, you're gonna go to the back burner since you're almost hot. This oven's really nice. I don't have ovens this nice at home. This is birch syrup. I use the medium birch syrup. It's a noticeably different flavor. If you've never used it before, buy a small jar before you buy a big jar. A little goes a long way. And at first we had, I think it was the people that do the birch syrup. You guys do a light, a medium, and a dark?
Well, we do ours in batches, and the sap that comes off first produces the light, so yeah, we take, whatever comes off first and boil that down, and then we just label it as for the date, just so we can when we got the sap, but it's definitely different as you get later and later in the season, it's darker and stronger and stronger.
So it's in the season, not in the reduction, right?
I know that, one people that do it there, they also have some mixers where they mix it.
Yeah, he's got like a blend, like
Breakfast syrup and stuff.
the winemaker of birch syrup.
Right, and it's strong.
Yeah, and it is. So keep that in mind. I know you can buy it. I know you can buy it at Alaska Wildberry Products for sure. There's a couple other places every now and then I'll see it. It's kind of expensive. Like I get, I think each quart I get is like $50, but at a ratio of 100 to 1. Like they take 100 gallons and they get 1 gallon of birch syrup, so you can understand why it might be so expensive. But it is fairly strong flavor. The first stuff we got, the first stuff we got was, I think he sent us 3 mediums and 1 dark, and we started using the dark inadvertently, and I had him thin it down with half maple syrup. We had this really nice aged reserve maple syrup, but it was like sour and kind of pungent, and I was like, ooh, I don't know if that's, I mean, I want to use local Alaskan products, but that is sour.
Maybe she can sell you some too.
What's that?
Maybe she can sell you some too.
Maybe she can. How much work are you doing? To be fair, I bought a gallon at the beginning of the season, and I still have a half gallon left. And we sell a lot of duck, so it doesn't take very much. Okay. I was gonna ask for a volunteer to do dishes, but almost burnt the sweet potatoes, but I didn't burn it. Didn't burn it. Thank you. He was like, yeah, right, we're about to taste right. We'll know.
Broccolini, baby broccoli.
Broccolini is a cross between broccoli and what is it? Tatsoi or pak choi? It's a cross between like a Chinese vegetable and asparagus.
What?
I was like, oh, it's just little broccolini. It's not.
Oh.
It's a cross between two different vegetables, like a Chinese broccoli and asparagus. And I forget the reason. If you Wikipedia it, there's it pops up and like they did it because they wanted something that was like this but tasted like that.
Wow. But it definitely looks.
All right, I'm using the same sweet potato pot. Don't judge me. But it's only had sweet potatoes in it this whole time. That's just to start with.
Oh, yeah.
Butter.
Is that grass-fed butter?
It is not. We do not use grass. If I use grass-fed butter at the restaurant, my boss would be like, "So how do you plan to pay for that?" I'd be like, "What do you mean? It's healthy." He'd be like, "It's expensive. It's healthy and it's expensive." But at home, I always use it. I haven't bought regular butter in probably 2 years.
Natural Pantry? Where do you buy it?
Natural Pantry, Fred Meyer's has it sometimes. Occasionally, yeah, it would be over in the organic section. I went to Palmer one time buying produce. Give me 1 second, and like it was cheaper than I'd ever seen it in town. It was ridiculous. I didn't have any money. Of course, I would have bought all of it. Grass-fed does not mean free range. I'll touch on that second. Question.
Sometimes the organic gets put in the other section because it goes bad in the organic section because people don't know to look for it. So you really have to check. Buying milk is really, really complicated.
Yeah. It is. Isn't that ridiculous? Remember when the store used to be laid out super easy? Now they do this maze thing where you can't get out. Like, if you'll just stay here and buy more stuff. And then you buy more stuff and take it home and it goes bad before you use it. How many people do that?
Oh, yeah.
Costco, right? You go to Costco, you're like, look at it, it's such a great deal. And then the weekend comes, then you go out to eat, and then And then you're like, darn it. I just spent $200. I can't get out of there without spending $300. It's terrible.
I know, that's the thing.
So 5 spice. You don't have to use 5 spice. You can use cinnamon, clove, nutmeg. If you use nutmeg and clove, super light. A little bit goes a long way. And I'm gonna do something here that I talk about home cooks maybe doing or not doing. I'm probably gonna put in more butter than that. Like I probably know that this needs more butter, and it probably needs more 5 spice. But I'm not gonna put it all in at once. I'm gonna put a little bit in, let it heat up, and then I'm gonna go back and check. And then if it needs more, I'll add more. The thing to keep in mind, especially with salt and people, my cooks are always like, well, how much should I put in? I'm like, well, think of it like this. You can always add more, but you can't take it out. People are like, how much should I cook it? Like, we can always cook it more, but we can't ever uncook it. You know what I mean? So always err on the side of less, because you can always add more, you can always take it farther as far as cooking time, but don't go crazy, because people are like, oh, there's tricks to taking salt. There's no trick to taking salt out of anything. They're like, oh, cut up a potato and stick it in. That does not work. Whoever told, I had a chef tell me that once, and I tried it, and basically I messed with this soup for hours and hours, and then he made me remake it anyway. When what he could have said is like, it's done, remake it. And I would have been done in half the time. So salt, cooking times, all that, you can always add it. But once it's in there, you can't take it out.
But you didn't learn your lesson until you worked at it for 20 years.
That was early on. It looks like a lot, but there's a lot of sweet potato here. All right, the rest.
How many sweet potatoes did you start with?
I'm gonna say this amount is probably 20. That's my mother. Mom, I'm in the middle of a cooking demo. Can I call you back? Say, hey, hang on. Say hi, Mom. Hi, Mom. You hear that? All right, bye. Yeah, you should have seen me when she was down here helping. You would not have said that. Mom's like putting stuff on the counter, I'm taking stuff off the counter. Mom, what are you doing? That's terrible. What's that? I have a small place, and the other thing you'll notice is that here's been pretty clean the whole time. When you're at home in your own kitchen, most of them aren't set up to cook like this, and it's super frustrating. The other thing your kitchen doesn't have is one of these. Right? How do I do this? Man, I really thought that was going to be heavier than that. There we go.
There.
This is a dream come true. Every home kitchen should have one of these because, you know, we talked about getting the pan hot and doing all that. If you do that at your house, 9 times out of 10 the smoke detector is going to go off. Don't feel bad. If your smoke detector goes off but you didn't burn your food, oh. He's like, what are you doing? You're killing me. If you do that at home and your smoke detector goes off but you didn't burn your food, it probably means you did it right. I took the batteries out of my smoke detector when I moved in. There's one in the back bedroom that has it, I think, but that's from the liquid coming out of the duct bag. Don't be scared, it does happen. Well, I want to make sure you get everybody gets some. I better do all of it. What am I gonna do? Take it with me? And so now you'll see, like, I don't know if you guys can see it, but now there's a lot of fat in this pan.
And that's just the fat from the deck. You didn't
That's
put any
nope.
oil.
I started with a dry pan. Okay, so that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12.
Will the last one be more flavorful?
Maybe what's gonna happen is they're gonna render faster. So I've started, but now they're gonna like basically pan fry themselves. And naturally occurring healthy fat that I didn't have to pay for. I paid for it.
Wow, yes.
Yeah, so at the restaurant, I probably wouldn't let them get this far, but I would tell them, when I told them to dump it out, I would tell them to save some. Save a little bit in the pan, and then as long as it's hot, they'll fry faster. All right, I am gonna do, I just realized I forgot a plate, like a big fancy restaurant plate to show you guys, like, ooh, ah, this is what we do at the restaurant. So we're going on plastic. So it needs more 5 spice and a pinch more salt. The butter actually I think is good. Not so much because of the flavor, but because of the texture. Keep in mind when you're adding fat, it is gonna adjust the consistency as well as the flavor. And because these are yams and they're real watery, like the water is gonna cook out a little bit. Notice it's on, I notice you can't see the heat, but it's on low heat. I don't want to cook them anymore because they are already cooked. I just want to heat them up. But as I do that, some of that water is going to evaporate, so they can become a little more stiff, I guess. which is fine, which is what I want. In the restaurant, I want this to hold up the duck breast and the broccoli. So there's a couple tricks to that. One, you can cook it more over heat. Two, before I pass them, I would lay them on a tray and pop them back in a low temp oven to kind of dry them out. Same thing with your mashed potatoes. If your mashed potatoes are running a lot, when you strain off the water, either let them sit for a while or put them back in the oven to dry. It's better, whatever you're doing, keep them hot. If you try and go through a tammy like I did, or if you have a food mill at home, or even you have a little old mixer and you try and do it and your potatoes have cooled down, can you switch? Okay, and your potatoes have cooled down, then you're gonna have a really hard time. Like as long as I took doing the sweet potatoes, you'll be doing that twice as long because all those starches start to congeal and it's a mess. 57? See, he counted. Always count twice. Did you have a question or you just raising your hands and he counted? Stretching your arms? Me too. So I'm, yes.
On your refined fats topic, you said you cook with coconut oil. You use the white. Have you ever tried the refined coconut oil? And is there a difference in terms of the nutritional value, the quality?
I haven't, but now that you mention that, I should. Because if it's refined, I bet it would be the same as like Crisco or lard, where it wouldn't make your house smell.
It doesn't hardly have any flavor. I know,
No, I know what you mean. That's it's kind of like.
But that's so your house doesn't smell.
Yeah, that's good. I'll look into that. Because I was wondering that. I'm like, man, I wonder if there's coconut oil where it's just oil, where it doesn't make everything kind of taste like coconut. Because that is one of the drawbacks. Like, I don't always want it to taste like coconut. Not that I don't like coconut. Is that in just the quart containers?
It's a little smaller.
Yeah.
It's like gold.
Okay, I think I have used that. My girlfriend used to get that. So I'll look into that.
No.
Yes.
What oil you use, solid or liquid?
It's definitely malleable. It's not, like it doesn't set up like butter, but it's not liquid like olive oil. Does that make sense? So it's kind of an in-between. Pretty good. Am I over time? I think this plate's down here. Yeah, I think just these and forks and knives. And then we'll just leave these stacked up here. Yeah, I'll get it. Okay.
Not necessary.
So we're just discussing, we are going to need some volunteers to help plate. So if you ever wanted to be on Gordon Ramsay, Top Chef, any of those shows, feel free to come up. I'll scream at you and be like, not yet, not yet. I'll call you. Oh. Here's another restaurant trick. It's got to double up. That's not going to work.
Oh no.
Okay.
It's just like it won't do it.
Careful. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to run to the bathroom and change this bandage, put a glove on, and I'll be right back. I do this all the time. It'll be fine. It really will be fine.
I know, that's what I said. I don't know what you're using for what thing. What are you using? Oh, it's the first year. Right. We're not gonna make any of it, but it's giving us so much insight. I know.
And a cinnamon stick. But he puts cinnamon in it. I had that sometimes. Yeah, but there it is. But none of it's put in there. What was the other thing? Time twice a year. And the
Don't be shy with the herbs either.
Oh, herbs in the potatoes. You're wondering where you were going to stick them.
Pretty much in anything. My cooks get mad at me because when I'm like, hey, put more herbs in that, and they kind of give me this look like I don't have any more. And then I'm like, you need more. You should have cut more. Yeah. And then they look at me like, you don't have to cut these things.
So what did you just put in there?
A little bit of the herb mixture. So it's parsley, thyme, and chives.
Okay.
So if you come to the restaurant, pretty much anything that you get that has an herb, that has herbs in it, that's our blend. It's usually kind of just like mirepoix, 50% parsley, 25% thyme, 25% chive. Depending on what you're doing, you're gonna want different herbs. Like I wouldn't put sage in this, I think it would overpower it. Rosemary either, those are two very strong herbs. We put dill in our we put herbs in our salad mix. On a recent trip to San Francisco, I went to a place called Boulevard, which is downtown near the Ferry Building in San Francisco. Nothing super fancy, nothing super crazy as far as food goes, but really solid local ingredients and prepared really good. But one of the things that struck me that I kind of took back from that was their salads had like little pieces of dill and chive, and it was a much more flavorful blend. So if you grow herbs in the summer, just take some scissors, snip that right in there, and then you have a much more wide range of options. Our salad greens at the restaurant get tarragon, dill, and chive. You could do parsley, you could do mint, you could do cilantro. A lot of Thai food, a lot of Vietnamese food has mint and cilantro in it, which people are like, man, this is amazing. So tarragon, dill, and chives is what I use at the restaurant, but you can do whatever you want, whatever grows well on your front porch.
I don't want to be disrespectful, but I can't help it. Do you have a sweet potato chef on staff?
Do I have a sweet potato chef?
Yes, because there's so much work in it.
Oh, no, that's not. Why would that be disrespectful? No, no. It's actually not. And what it is, it's time management. So I don't know. Like I told you I didn't put the sweet potato in when I got here, but the two things that I started with that probably you didn't see is I got the water on the stove and got that boiling. Is what I would do. I actually didn't do that because I didn't have enough pots. But I got the water on the stove and got it boiling, and I put the sweet potatoes in the oven. So while I'm doing this other stuff, the sweet potatoes are cooking, and then, you know, this is really hot. So that's it. It's cooked. Okay, and you can, like, it's just tender enough that I grab it, and it's tender. It's not, and you see it's kind of oozing. I think the recipe says till they start to ooze a brownish liquid. That's this, right? When they're tender, can you all see that? when it starts to leak, like looks like maple syrup coming out, that's a good sign that they're done. So if it's leaking a little bit and you squeeze it and it's tender, take it out and just let it sit on the counter. And then so what I would do with this at home, instead of doing the big thing and passing it, I'm just gonna let it sit until it's cold enough to handle. I would probably try and handle it right now and just keep burning myself. I'm just gonna unwrap it, put it in a bowl and stir it with a whisk, and then you're done. And you can do 6 sweet potatoes like that and leave them in the fridge and use it for whatever. They make great kind of like latkes, like hash browns. Like you put it in an egg pan. You can ring mold it or just put a scoop and let it go until it gets a crust on the bottom, and then flip it over. If you flip it over, I wouldn't try and use a rubber spat. Just try and do the flip. You know what I mean? But I would flip it over and then just throw it in the oven, and it comes out like crispy on both sides and gooey in the middle. Really, really nice.
Why throw it in the oven?
So that it gets hot in the middle. Because otherwise, depending on how thick it is, you know what I mean? You'll have a nice crust, but the inside will be cold. If I'm eating for myself, it doesn't bother me at all. Yeah. Just like, as long as it's crunchy, I don't care.
You fry it in oil on the stove?
Yeah, a little oil, a little butter, in a little egg pan there.
Good.
You do coconut oil?
And, I mean, you don't have to cook with coconut oil. I do. That's my personal preference, but now I'm just gonna glaze it with the birch syrup.
Were those baked in the oven?
What?
After
Nope, they haven't gone into the oven yet.
They will be now.
Yeah, I am gonna finish them. I'm gonna try and take them to medium rare. Does anybody not like medium rare? Does anybody want their duck cooked a little more? It's okay. Feel free to say. You more than medium rare? Are you a well done guy? Oh, come on. Are you a hunter too? Are you a hunter? Yeah. It's such an interesting thing. Did you see the Anthony Bourdain where he goes to like Wisconsin and he's talking to the duck hunters and those guys are like, oh, we don't eat duck, we just shoot it. He's like, it's like, what are you talking about? They're like, man, duck is terrible. It's chewy, it's dry, and he's like, oh, crispy skin, rare, medium rare. And so I would recommend you try it a different way today, maybe, but I'll cook one a little bit longer for you. So these two guys take Anthony Bourdain duck hunting, and they're just like, yeah, we don't eat duck, man. Duck is awful. We shoot it, but you know. And then he cooks duck for them similar to this. He just renders the skin, gets it crispy, and serves it like medium rare. And they're like, "That's pretty good. Better than any duck I ever had." For me, if you overcook a duck breast, it's yeah.
And then there's the Alaskan who loves to fish, and doesn't eat it.
Yeah, my grandfather the same way. I grew up fishing with my grandfather. We would go poach rainbow trout because he had a creek on his property. He had literally like fishing pole and a trash bag stashed inside a tree trunk. It was awesome. But we'd bring back these beautiful trout, and we wouldn't go kill it. We'd get like 1 or 2 trout when I was like 4. You know, so if anybody's judging. But we'd go back, and I'd be like, Grandpa, do you want to? He'd be like, oh, no, I don't eat fish. Grandma loved it, but Grandpa not so much. I'm like, why are we here fishing if you don't like fish? And then I was like, oh, because Grandma likes it. You can learn a lot from your grandfather. These are almost done. What's that? This knife is a Shun. I think they're made by Kershaw or Gerber. It's supposed to, the dimples are supposed to be from like Hammer Damascus too. You can check it out if you want. They're a good, I would say, mid-range knife. This is, I'm a big fan of Japanese knives. I feel like they're better. This is my favorite knife. You see right there, the tip's broken off. Because I was cutting and I knocked it onto the floor. It's a $300 knife. That's now not worth $300. But that's, I mean, what's that? It does. It works amazing. I've thought about having them take it down and make it something different, but I think it's like a Santuco or something, right? All right. And I'm gonna add a little water to this because I've reduced it too far. That's the other thing. If you're making your sauce at home and you're like, oh, it's too far, just add water. Because that's all you've done to it by reducing it is removing water to concentrate flavor.
Can you remind us what's in that sauce?
Mirepoix, duck bones,
Okay.
chicken bones, port wine, and veal stock. Veal stock is a baby cow. Okay, we use veal stock because it has more gelatin than regular beef and a milder flavor. So it's more neutral. What's that? You'd have to buy veal bones and make it. If you do go buy bones, if you want to make like a stock at home, a really good thing to do is just buy oxtail. Lots of connective tissue in there. Neck bones is good. Joint bones are better. Like, go to the butcher shop and be like, hey, I'm looking for some joint bones. What do you got? And they'll be like, yeah, right here. Go for it. And they'll be like probably $1.90 a pound or something. Mr. Prime Beef will have them. That's more of a retail butcher shop. You don't want to buy as large quantities as I do. But you never know. C&J's might be worth checking on. They might be able to break a case or give you, or they might have something that's left over from somebody else that they can sell you a smaller portion. Or, you know, it depends too on what you have available to store stuff in at your house. Yes.
I've bought duck at C&J's and they're very good. They'll give you whatever you want.
Yeah.
Break it down, no problem.
Tim's.
With me anyway, I don't.
No,
I'm
he's
sure they
a
would do
great
it.
guy. He's awesome.
Only me. No, I'm just kidding.
Just me. None of you else can shop there. Don't ruin my connection with the butcher. And yeah, get to know your butcher. Ask him questions. Go see him often. There's a funny thing in Kitchen Confidential. What does he say? He's like, I find that most men in the butcher business are funny or have a sense of humor, and most men in the fish business do not. I think that's a testament to the amount of time their product can last before they lose money. Fish, like maybe 12 to 24 hours. Meat, you know, several weeks. You can age it, they can freeze it. Not too many people want frozen fish. All right. Now this is the crucial time at the restaurant where I'm like, are you ready on the duck? You're like, ready when you are, chef. All right, pick up the duck. Like, pick up one duck, mid-rare, herd. That's how you call it back. So when that happens, hopefully, I've gotten this ready, but I haven't finished it. This is what happens in the restaurant. Then I'm gonna take this pan, put it down here. Wrong burner, new stove. Let it get hot. Don't put the oil into the pan's hot. Where is this? Where's my butter?
What temperature is the oven on?
This oven is at 425, but it's a regular conduction oven, I think. It's a really fancy oven that I don't really know how to work. I'm just impressed that I got it through. The ovens that I use at work in most kitchens are convection ovens. That means they have a fan in them. So does everybody know the difference between conduction and convection? Conduction is radiant heat. So most of your ovens at home are conduction ovens. What happens is the oven turns on, it cycles, it gets hot, it turns off. It cools down, it cycles again, it turns on. So your oven temperature is always going like this. If you're baking stuff, turn your oven on and let it cycle 3 times to get the most consistent temperature. At a restaurant, we have a convection oven, which means air moving over stuff. So this is a fan blowing heat, and it goes even faster. But that's going back to the part about sous vide and controlling temperature. That's why they went to sous vide, because ovens cycle like that. There's nothing you can do to keep your oven from cycling, especially if you're opening and closing it a lot, like you do in a restaurant.
So are you saying in a
Conduction, there's no fan. It's just radiant heat.
So 425 in a conduction oven, or?
Yeah. I mean, I would do 425 either way.
Oh.
You can do, and it's because I've already crisped it up, and I'm just gonna finish it. It's still not gonna cook. It's cooking pretty fast. It's not gonna cook as fast as I might want it. Just so you know, at the restaurant, all of our ovens are at 500 degrees. Not all of them. The two on the line, I keep one oven with all my pans in it. We don't even cook in it. It just has pans in it. That's so when you order, I can pull a pan out and I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
I'm not waiting for it to get hot. As soon as I pull the pan out, I'm ready to start cooking. But the other oven is at 500 that I cook in as well, and that's because the meat's been sous vide, and I don't want it to go up and down, and I don't want it to be in there very long. I'm just finishing it, bringing that internal temperature up the last little bit.
Wait, so you keep all your pans at 500 degrees?
Yep. So you never, if you see a guy who says he works in the kitchen and he walks around without one of these in his hand, he probably works in the pantry. Like, what do you do? I make the desserts, like I bet you do. And what's funny is the pantry guy comes in and they have more towels than anybody. And you're like, you don't even pick up anything hot. Why do you have like 18 towels? I had that same conversation several times.
Why do they?
Why do they? They think they need them. What's that?
You mentioned the sous vide.
Sous vide.
And how do you spell that? I'd like to.
S-O-U-S. And then the second word is vide. And it's a French for under vacuum. Vide is V-I-D-E. They make little sous vide machines you can buy at your home. They're called Nomuco. And it's a little thing that clips on a pot and you plug it in. It's got a dial. My friend's wife, he got her one for Christmas. She's been using it with amazing results. Putting out lamb that looks professional. All right, now it's hot. It's smoking. All right, I'm going to pull it off. It's a little bit hotter than I want. Oil. That's the other thing. These are things you should have next to your stove. Salt, pepper, butter, and oil. Keep that, like, instead of having like 6 spoon caddies that are decorative, keep a bottle of oil, a thing of butter, and some salt, and a pepper shaker. Barely any. Sweating the vegetables. Adding the broccoli in. Let me get that out of the way so you can see. Up high with the salt. Another thing you'll notice I'm not doing is I'm not putting pepper on this. I don't put pepper on most of the vegetables in the restaurant. If we're going to do grilled veg, I might. Other than that, I don't want to cover up the flavor of the vegetables. Chicken stock. Here we go. Okay, vegetables sweated, but there's no color. Okay, no color, no color. Anybody see that? Yeah. All right, and I'm going to deglaze. That much. Not very much at all. And as you get, if I had a bigger pan or I had more in there, then obviously I would use more liquid. But for this amount, and this is exactly what we do in the restaurant. You order the duck, that's how much I put in there. Not very much. Then I'm reducing it to a point that's called au sec, which is French for almost dry. Okay? When it gets there, that's when you want to add your butter. Now this last part, and again, herbs. Now I do the herbs. And this is called glazing. So you see how it's creamy? It's kind of creamy looking. It's not like broken butter and then sauce. So I would do that, and then the other thing I do at the restaurant, where did those things go? I had a bunch of them. Before we put the food on your plate, I do this. So I glazed it, seasoned it, chicken stocked it, and then I take that. And I pat it dry before I put it on your plate. Otherwise, a lot of places they'll do like 6 or 8 orders of veg at one time, and you get a plate that's really runny. It's got like the sauce, and then it's got this other stuff. That's all the butter and the chicken stock that they either didn't glaze or didn't pat dry.
So you deglaze before you glaze?
I deglaze, yes. You deglaze with chicken stock, and then you glaze the vegetables with that. All right. This is going to be our 7 Glaciers plate for today.
We won't tell Jason.
Don't tell Jason. Tell Jason. Jason's like, hey, I need you to do this cooking demo. I'm like, sure, when is it? He's like, next week. You know it's Valentine's Day, right? He's like, that's why you're going. Because I can't go. Yes, I'm filling in for my boss, Jason. I hope you don't mind. I hope I did okay.
Great.
Send him an email. Tell him I was amazing. Jason Porter. Oh, there you go. Oh. She's like, no, I know who he is.
Tell him. I'm glad he was busy.
So, sweet potatoes, center of the plate. And this is another thing for, you want to make your food look fancy at home, a little bit of graphic design for you. You want a focal point, and then you want to create an eye flow. Think about 40% negative space on the plate. I'm going to pat this dry. Take my broccolini, and I'm going to wrap it around. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the stems of the broccolini. Normally this plate's bigger. I'm going to hide the stems of the broccolini with the duck breast. Now duck is a little fickle to cut as well, so if you don't have a sharp knife, flip it over and put the skin side down. That way you can go through it. I talked about letting it rest, and now I'm not letting it rest. I'll let these rest. For the sake of our plate, I'm going to cut it right now. I'm also going to cut it a little thinner than I would normally cut it at the restaurant. I only usually take one of these breasts into about 5 slices. Okay? Another thing. This is the other thing. These are the little details that separate our restaurant from other restaurants you go to where the food's good, but it might not look as nice. I have a food runner who is an awesome skier, a college graduate, and she works for me all day long, and all she does is stuff like tie lemons wrapped in mesh cloth and cut paper towels so that cooks can do stuff like this and then throw them away. Another thing, grilled items and stuff with crispy skin. I'm doing this for you guys because it's for looks, but normally what I would do is put the sauce on before I put the duck on. Because it took all that time. Well, the thing with grilled beef, grill marks, anything grilled, you want to show those grill marks, right? Oh, yeah. Sauce underneath is the classic French way. You don't have to do it, but that's the point. Why you put the sauce underneath is so you can see those grill marks. Same thing as I wouldn't want to ruin this nice crispy skin with the duck. So normally what we do in the restaurant is do the sauce over the broccolini and a little bit underneath. And then you yell, "Food runner!" And some poor server's like, "Oh my God, I'm trying, hurry!"
Yeah.
All right, who wants to help plate? Here you go. Can you move this? Right in. Yes. Yeah. Heart.
Most people taste like liver and don't realize that it's a muscle, so it doesn't.
It doesn't taste like liver at all.
I spend a lot of time with the Canadian family, so I'm into other things that they've done with heart. What is the fastest, quickest, most delicious thing you've ever done with heart?
With heart?
Because I've got a family of hunters, so we have
I honestly, what I do with heart is I do two things. I either cook it in a crock pot a really long time, or I barely cook it at all. So trim off all the fat and the connective tissue, slice it super thin, and grill it on super high heat. What I do is I get kimchi from New Central Market. I put it in the blender. I marinate the heart in that, cut, and then I take that and either grill it or throw it in a hot saute pan, serve it rare, make tacos with it.
And what do you do in the crock pot?
Crock pot, I have this kind of a Colombian recipe for, it was for beef tongue, but it's like red wine, beef stock, a little sachet, and then you add like chilies and tomato paste and let it go for almost 2 days. And then you basically like stir it, garnish it with parsley and capers, and it is amazing. Okay.
So if you don't have a block of that stuff in your refrigerator, is there another kind of sauce or something that you could whip up?
So you can make your own beef stock in a crock pot.
Well, that's what that was, beef stock.
Veal stock, beef stock, veal's baby cow. So veal has more gelatin. The other thing you do is get those gravy packets.
Oh.
I think those are awesome. Or you can just buy regular beef stock and reduce it down. You know what I mean? But get the low sodium kind. All right, ladies, what's your name? Judith? And you?
Rachel.
Rachel? All right. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm going to take. I brought somewhere. You see this?
Purple scoops right there.
Perfect. Just to make sure everybody gets some, I'm gonna move this cutting board. We're gonna put the sweet potatoes here. Sweet potato, I'll cut the duck. Someone's gonna put the duck on, and then we'll do a little sauce, okay? So this is gonna need to come over here. Sweet potatoes can go here. Yeah. We're gonna put plates right on there. Okay. There's this. I'm gonna take this. You are gonna have the plates, and this is normally how the plate up goes. Like if you go to a restaurant, and they're like, "Oh, there's 40 of us, but we're just gonna eat in the restaurant." Like, this is going on while we're feeding regular diners, so it's a little bit of a hustle. Let me turn that off. Pardon me, sir. No problem. You can't sneak. You can't sneak. Nope.
I was gonna help separate.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Here, take them like.
Oh, that's good.
Okay. Flip them, and come from the. See this? You used to have to do the same thing with those pesky doilies they put underneath. Okay. All right.
Chef?
Yes.
When you were talking about the gravy packet, were you talking about the powdered McCormick brand MSG?
Yep. Yeah. I know. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. The other thing you can do, if you get a nice flavorful liquid and it's not quite as thick as you want it, cornstarch. You can buy xanthan gum or Ultratex sometimes. Those are both modified food starches derived from corn, and what they do is they just thicken stuff. You usually need a blender or a hand blender if you're going to use those, though.
But what do you do if you're paleo? Do you do corn? So you don't like grain, but you like
Well,
corn?
yeah, exactly. You reduce it. You can add gelatin to it, but oh, here. So you're going to do this. You're going to take these, and then you're going to pass one over.
Okay. You want it right in the middle?
Yep, right in the middle. Okay. And it's probably going to be easier if you leave them stacked. I'm going to come over here, Rachel. You come right here. I'll cut the duck and hand it to you. Okay. And just slide it this way. And then let me get the sauce. Who's got a strong sauce hand? Anybody? You'll do it?
Yep.
It's a test right there. We'll see. Nope. You're gonna slide them right by me. So we're gonna go this way. Ray's gonna sauce and then put them on the plate. Go ahead. Just grab it.
What do you think of that
Yep,
better
one
than
place per-
bouillon product?
Of that what?
Better than bouillon?
I don't know that I'd use it. Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
Yes, that's exactly. That's what I was.
Here, make it look. Yeah, why not? Right on there. It's okay. You're gonna slide it? Yep. Just a little sauce.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I don't have to take big thing.
Oh, it's alright. That's. We're not at work.
And Miss Alicia, you can give away another gift certificate.
You're already winning. Look at this valuable restaurant experience you're gaining.
I know.
Next weekend. Oh, are you? Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Does somebody want to grab this tray and take a lap down Victory Lane? Forks I have. That is a great idea. Here, would you do the honors? Put some forks on there for us? Thank you so much.
All right, so the third winner Dylan Roberts?
Yeah, right here.
Nice. Right there, congratulations.
By shaking it. Just so you know, that does happen from time to time. We're like, I can't. Why are you giving me in pieces? We can't serve those. Like, what do you want me to do with them? Eat it. The kid that used to, so I would work in what they call the middle, which is running the ticket wheel, and the kid that would work next to me would often like overcook a steak. And be like, hang on, chef, I need to recook that steak. It'll be 3 minutes. I'm like, and then in 2 minutes, I look over, and here's like a little slider with mashed potatoes, demi, and I'm like, I thought you overcooked it. He's like, well, I did, but now what are we gonna do with it?
Kids gotta eat.
We're gonna have sliders, I guess. You'll get more than this one bite. I'm just gonna put the rest of these up, and then you can come grab after everybody's gotten one. Yeah. Okay. Oh, more first here.
For something I would never make. I sure took a lot of notes, but I figured it was good. I didn't put it like a yeah.
All right. I don't know what that means, but I think we're ready.
Aaron, it says on here you're an avid hunter. What's your favorite wild game?
My favorite wild game to hunt?
Or no, to eat, hunt and eat.
Favorite to eat is sheep. Probably least favorite to hunt. And I say that because I've never been able to go sheep hunting. My uncles have. I enjoy hunting moose. Probably because I have to cover the least amount of ground. And believe it or not, grouse. I used to have a really good time grouse hunting. What is grouse? Spruce hens mostly. It was the quickest way to get grouse without and the least amount of effort because they'll just hang out. Rough grouse spook pretty easy. I did have an interesting experience with when I was younger hunting sharptails. We were in Summit Lake where they have Arctic Man and they do all the snow machining. So we had a big backpack and there was 5 or 6 of us. A couple had shotguns, a couple had 22s. And we probably shot 12 or 14 each, and everyone was taking turns carrying the backpack. Well, I'm really short, and at the end of the day, it was my turn to carry it, and I had to post hold down from like 2,500 feet with maybe like 40 birds in my back plus the gun, and I'm just up to my waist, and then crawl out, and then take another step, and up to my waist. It was terrible. My friends had a great time. They thought it was the funniest thing ever. I literally at one point thought I was gonna die. I was like, I'm gonna suffocate right now. How is it, everybody?
Delicious.
Delicious? You haven't taken a bite yet? Oh, you're so disciplined. I took a bite like 10 minutes ago. Alright, here, take a bite. Ladies, we can get the rest. You should take a plate and go enjoy the free cookie later. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week. What's buttery? The sweet potatoes? There's not very much butter in them.
They're buttery. Oh, really? Yeah.
Who didn't get any yet?
Was that well enough for you, sir? Do you want to try one not as well?
Yes.
Or you already did try it? Kind of raw?
Wow. It's delicious.
It's okay.
Miss Alicia, can we give away the last certificate, please?
Try this. Yeah? Should be. You like sweet potatoes?
Very much. I love sweet potatoes.
I didn't make those, got me. That's all I did, literally. I just baked them. All right. I'm gonna put the rest of these plates up, and feel free to come grab another one if you'd like.
Fourth winner, Karen Liliana. Karen Liliana.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. We'll be up there.
Awesome. Can't wait to see you.
Karen Juliana? Well, you know the rules.
You must be present to win. He said, he did say that.
Again, I went to her lecture, I was stressed. I did, she was very good. And then I had plenty of time to get over there. Delicious.
It is a lot of work. But we're fortunate enough to be part of a hotel where we're not doing all of that stuff. So we have a butcher that makes the veal stock for us. You know what I mean? So instead of making veal stock, I could just order 3 gallons.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
No. So the birches, I just took and brushed on here on the skin. And then it gets like candy a little bit, a little crispy. Some more.
Yummy, 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 yummy.
Thyme, parsley, and chives.
It's very good. I am still not on.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming.
I wasn't the
Thank you
last
very
time.
much.
Oh, thank you very much.
Miss Alicia, who's the next one that's coming?
Oh, it's all right. Email me.
The French, the French,
The French.
pastry, Club Paris, or no, not Club Paris, Paris Bakery. I think it's
Paris
Paris
Bakery.
Bakery.
There.
I hope he makes them.
But give a big hand for Chef right here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hopefully the next one I'll be here earlier and a little bit more organized.
And I have to say,
He did pastry
I'm
once and he
done
did something else
bananas
last time.
and
Yeah, I like the pastry.
Same exact thing. Anything you want, really. Yeah. And do it the same way. Just sear it and then brush it with the syrup if you want. Maple syrup, whatever. Yeah. It's not just for duck. You can do it with whatever you want. So we're open now Thursday nights, just for dinner, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Serve dinner from 5 to 9. Cocktails till 10 in the lounge. And lunch is from noon to 3. Oh no. Lunch is from noon to 3. Also Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then starting, I never remember this. Which one's, I got you right here. Which one's first? Memorial Day? Yeah. So we open Memorial Day weekend in the summer, and then there's no lunch, but we are open 7 days a week, all summer long. And depending on business, it'll go through Labor Day sometimes, maybe not. But please come see us. Make a reservation. The tram ride's free if you have reservations. Otherwise, it's $18. Well,
You notice I'm not a chef?
any more questions? You can feel free to come up, ask me whatever you want.
That was wonderful. Thank
As soon as you stop asking me questions, I gotta leave and go back to work. So, any questions at all, anything.